Chapter 46-26. That was enough to kill the half-ancestor class, barely, and the ancestor level to compete against the top ancestors, and hit the sensible bone dragon on the sky without any obstacle. It is not so much that it is not blocked, but it is not avoided at all. Senran bone dragon raised its head, and chaos and dark dragon breath sprang up. An appalling scene appears. The heavenly gate of that majestic style was extremely intact and fell on the head of the bone dragon intact, but it only dispelled the dark dragon breath, leaving a shallow mark on the skull. Then the two groups of stars day-like death lights suddenly flashed from their eyes, directed directly at Jian Wushuang and radiated two majestic death lights. Horrified in his heart, without waiting for the sword Wushuang to take action, the Lao Zun above the sky shot to grab the dead light. The layers of black water ripples spread in the air, the sky suddenly collapsed, and a large palm condensed by black water was covered under the head of the bone dragon. Two extremely special and immense amounts of energy collided, and the instantaneous shock wave tore the sky and the earth apart. Bone dragon's raised head seemed to have hit an open-air hammer, and then fell straight to the ground with his entire body. Jian Wu's eyes narrowed, and he hurried to leave the ground and swept to the sky. Boom! That bone dragon's body is too huge, almost as big as the entire Luodu star field. After landing on the ground, directly killed nearly 1,000 children of the unicorn tribe. The earth was collapsing rapidly, and the entire floor of Luodu seemed to be unable to bear it, breaking the Tao Tianyuan abyss. Taking a deep breath, Jian Wushuang looked at the Linha Dragon Emperor next to him, and when they talked among the dragons that day, they came to mind. Does this bone dragon have something to do with your dragon family? Although it is probably clear, Jian Wushuang asked for confirmation. The Emperor Linha shook his head slowly, and then bitterly said, "It is the open-source ancestor of the dragon family, and also my father who disappeared for no reason." Jian Wushuang opened his mouth and finally said, "What secrets can the dragons have to help them through this disaster?" The Emperor Linha shook his head again and sighed longly, "No, but the old man will try his best next time." The bone dragon that fell off the ground shook his head vigorously, and then shook the sky, and the dark dragon's breath directly wiped out Lao Zun's offensive. The black water robe hunted against the wind, and Jian Wushuang also saw Lao Zun's real shot for the first time. In the first battle against the promotion of the ancestor of the ancestral class, Lao Zun almost shot lightly. The strange sense of suppression on the top ancestor level, until now, has made Jian Wushuang memorable. At this moment, Lao Zun, like the coming of the Tianhe River, carried the endless potential of the Black Water River and crushed the ancestor bone dragon of the earth. The bone dragon shouted in the sky, without any fear. For dragon-like bone claws supported the ground, and the dragon's head pointed at Lao Zun and exhaled a fierce dark dragon breath. Oh! The two collided, and an invisible shock wave swayed in all directions. Jian Wushuang, who was closer to the battle center, felt a sweet throat, and a surge of blood came back. Jian Wushuang was completely shocked. His super-perfect creature characteristics and chaotic domineering were shocked by the outflow of blood under the aftershock. What level of collision was this battle at? The Linha Longdi, who belongs to the semi-ancestor class, opened his mouth and spit out a large mouthful of blood. Under this aftershock, the dark illnesses in his body were exposed. The children of the Kirin tribe not far away burst into blood mist on the spot. Luodu's sky dome was torn as much as possible, and the chaos spring eye at the center was expanding continuously. Seeing that most of the descendants of his clan were dead, half of his eyes were red, and he shouted, turned into a unicorn, and rushed up. The horror breath of the semi-ancestral class is always in a strong presence, but at present, even the aftermath is probably unbearable. Jian Wushuang reached out to block, but was swept open by the mighty spirit of Qishan. The original unicorn treasure, which stood out from the sky, looked much smaller in front of the bone dragon. It seemed that he felt an uneven breath and was vomiting. The dead light bone dragon suddenly twitched a tail, and the dragon tail with the sacral spine was directly drawn on the body of Qishan. The unicorn treasure that shrouded the colorful huameng was directly broken, and the shape of the unicorn was like a broken kite, which fell straight to the ground. Jian Wushuang stood up to his feet, and stretched out his hands to draw Kirshen's figure with divine power. A body of gold armor has been broken for more than half, especially the chest cavity is completely sunken, and the blood of God flows along the armor to the ground. At this moment, Qishan already has more air and less air. Why are you doing this? Jian Wu's eyes darkened. He opened a mouthful of blood, and Kiran opened his eyes round. Father! Kishan's 5 sons rushed away, his eyes flushed. You must lead the Kiran tribe to live and leave Luodu. This is no longer in your control. Kirshen asked with a calm expression. The original semi-ancestor was close to the immortal body. Because of the suppression of energy begins to age. Once aging, it is a symbol of immutability. Qi Shan slowly stretched out a hand and held the palm of Qi Ting firmly. His eyes seemed to convey words. In the end, Qi Shan fell in the arms of Jian Wushuang. The 5th son knelt down and wept. Jian Wushuang slowly placed Qi Shan on the ground, looking at the fierce battle in the sky. The damage that belongs to this kind of battle that breaks through the rules of the universe is unimaginable. The entire Luodu, whether it is the earth or the sky, has shattered, and the impact has begun to extend to the rest of the star domain. A huge spine with dark atmosphere was lifted out by Lao Zun, and then crushed into powder. The bone dragon was in pain and shouted in the sky, which was a big mouth that was enough to enclose the star domain, and the whale swallowed to Lao Zun. With both arms for a while, the black water formed a special flowing barrier in front of him, but the bone dragon slammed into it, but it stepped into the cotton. Bone dragon's head. Lao Zun's body was scattered and quietly reached the back of Bone Dragon when preparing to shake his arm to remove his head. Countless dark breaths escaped from the bone seams of Bone Dragon. Make a chain, winding to Lao Zun. Jian Wushuang's heart is not good, he immediately urged to fly to the sky. At the same time, the Taro Excalibur appeared in the hands, and the vast star bristled toward the dragon's back. Oh! The clearest meaning of the golden iron and iron strikes resounds throughout the world, and the chain that condenses from the dark atmosphere is directly torn by the sword intention of Jian Wushuang more than half. Then Lao Zun's repressed palm print followed. A clear bone fracture sounded throughout the Luodu star domain. The bone dragon wailed, and the spine behind the giant dragon's head was directly destroyed. There was no longer any support, and it fell to the ground miserably. Jian Wushuang exhaled inwardly, and was preparing to stand on the ground, but was stopped by Lao Zun. Chapter 46-27. He shook his head, then his black pupil looked at the ground. The bone dragon whose head and body were miserably separated fell to the ground again, but at the same time, a stronger dark atmosphere swept from the eyes of Chaos Spring. The unimaginable burst of energy made Jian Wushuang's heart horrified. The blackness condensed as a substance turned into thousands of silk threads, climbing between the bone dragon's head and the broken dragon's body, turned it back together. The dark breath was so high, the bone dragon came back to life, and the broken spine was filled with that strange energy. It had 4 claws to the ground, staring at Lao Zun in the dead eyes. Bring it to the sky and try my best to delay time, I went to close the spring eyes. After Lao Zun left the sentence, his body disappeared, leaving only the sword-shaped swordsman with a round face. Why what? Want me to delay? Jian Wushuang only felt a big head for a while, then the bone dragon that could burn the half-ancestor class almost with a breath of dragon's body, stared at Jian Wushuang naturally after the body of the old respect disappeared. Opening his mouth was a spit of dragon breath. Jian Wushuang felt a shock in his heart, and immediately urged the divine power to sweep towards the higher sky. Where the breath of the dragon passed, the air was burned, the sword unparalleled was able to avoid it, and then the heavenly gate of the ancestral power world fell on the head of the bone dragon. The splendid and magnificent divine power dazzled the entire star field, and one of the giant fingers of the sky protruded from the gate of heaven, facing the bone dragon sinking heavily. This style of ancestors that even the semi-ancestors do not dare to easily confront, is almost as tickling in front of the bone dragon. The bone dragon did not evade at all, and the vast finger dissipated after leaving a shallow mark on its forehead. Shouting from the sky, The huge figure of Bone Dragon rose up and went straight to Jian Wushuang. When he was soaring, he glanced subconsciously, and his face was almost green. I saw Bone Dragon's huge, almost bloated body, soaring at an inconsistent speed, and gradually narrowed the distance between the two. Jian Wushuang trembled in his heart, and at the same time his life was soaring. Behind him was the roar of a giant tremor. He just felt that the air around him was like a quagmire, which instantly restricted the flying speed. Jian Wushuang's heart sank fiercely, and he turned around and looked, and a Sensen skull almost the same as that of Dari was already in front of him. Just at this critical moment, Jian Wushuang only felt a gentle divine power on his waist, and then dragged him back quickly. A crisp phoenix ringed through the world. Jian Wushuang excited, "You are here." Zhitian Jufeng looked back at Jian Wushuang, and when he mentioned the tail feathers tied to his waist, he threw him all over his back. "If I don't come back, can you still talk to me now?" Hufeng's mouth uttered words, and a pair of fiery eyes filled with flames were full of anger. Sitting on Feng Qi's vast and soft back, Jian Wushuang scratched his head awkwardly. "Sit tight," Feng Qi reminded, and the wings flicked 1,000,000 miles. The Bone Dragon was furious, and the huge figure twisted immediately. The reunited Lao Zun looked up at the surging sky, and then looked at the still expanding chaos spring beneath his feet. All kinds of unknown and strange forces are swelled together, and from time to time they are transformed into various shapes that are weird. Lao Zun slowly took out the defeated palm from his sleeve robe, and a dark power appeared like a root. Then, like swimming water gradually flowing down, it seemed to carry the power of the entire Blackwater River to growl from his palm. Falling into the eyes of Chaos Springs, stirred up the dark clouds of smoke. At the same time, Chaos Spring eyes closed at a slow speed. The Bone Dragon, who was chasing Jian Wushuang and Feng Qi madly, seemed to notice something. After turning around, he dived straight towards the Lao Zun below. Jian Wushuang saw this and hurriedly said, "Hurry up, stop it, don't let it go." Feng Qi's huge phoenix eyes glared angrily at Jian Wushuang, and it seemed to be out of the way, fluttering his wings, and rushed directly to the Bone Dragon. The phoenix breath, which can burn all things, spit on the back of the Bone Dragon, but instantly disappeared. Gulong turned back and shot 2 deadlights directly, approaching Feng Qi. As the speed was too fast, the 2 deadlights hit Feng Qi's abdomen. With a wailing sound, the giant phoenix covering the sky is like a broken kite, turning into a human shape and falling straight to the ground. The sword Wushuang was shocked, and the divine power surged, reaching out to take the falling Feng Qi into his arms. "How are you?" Jian Wushuang was anxious, looking at Feng Qi and Huaizhong, and his chest was almost the same as that of Qishan. Coughing a spit of blood, Feng Qi half opened and closed Feng's eyes. "I'm a bit sleepy, I want to sleep well." "It's cold." Jian Wushuang sighed, and at the same time luck was poured into Fenki's meridians. "Don't sleep, cheer up. Think of so many descendants of your Feng tribe, and you will take them to fight alongside me." Feng Qi heard it and smiled reluctantly. "Then don't leave me." Jian Wushuang did not think much, nodded directly. A ray of flames emerged from Fenki's body, and the mysterious fiery nirvana of the Wind Clan has already opened. Gulong screamed, rushing to the Lao Zun with all his strength, towards Chaoyin Spring. The Emperor Linhe, who had been silent, appeared quietly and blocked Lao Zun. The cloudy eyes did not know when it was clear and full of youth. He opened his arms and exclaimed, "Father, the river is here." The sound that seems to be able to penetrate the clouds resounds throughout the Luodu star field. "Father, Linhe is here." The huge bone dragon body carries endless forces, and this drop is enough to destroy any star domain. Luo will no longer exist. In the face of this terrifying forest dragon, Linhe Dragon Emperor's eyes were not half afraid, and he looked calmly at everything that would happen next. The imagination's most devastating atmosphere is like the light wind and the wind converging, without half escape. A huge white-boned dragon head, as if through eternity, with a doubtful gaze, stared at the thin body that dared to stand in front of himself. The breathtaking dragon's breath swept the earth looking at the white-boned dragon head in front of the sky, Linha Longdi slowly stretched out his palm and touched it. The next moment, the majestic dragon's breath surging from the emperor of the river, a red gold dragon rose to the surface, entangled in the body of the giant white bone dragon. Bone dragon seems to gradually recover its consciousness, and the dead light in the eye sockets no longer exists, replaced by a dim glimmer of light. "You are, my son is near the river?" The old voice was clear. Linha Longdi nodded, his eyes moist. "It's me. I thought it would be harder to meet you in this life, but today I finally met you, and God treats me well." The words full of relief sounded from the mouth of Bone Dragon, with endless guilt. "The last thing I regret is that I shouldn't have searched for that arrogant realm, which has caused irreparable consequences today." Chapter 46:28. The Emperor Lin's eyes were red and he had been in the heart for a long time, but he didn't know how to speak. "Just during the time I left, I bitter you, and the whole dragon family." The bone dragon sighed, and the giant white bone dragon's head dropped slowly. The Emperor Linha shook his head. "No pain. Our dragons are still prosperous now, and they will continue to prosper in the future." "That's good, you need to take care of the dragons in Linha. I can't help you." Bone Dragon raised his head, and seemed to look towards the broken sky with some nostalgia. "The consciousness of treating me once again fell into chaos." Occasion. The Emperor Linha could not speak, because he could not see any biological characteristics from the Bone Dragon. The reason why the Bone Dragon can recognize him and wake up from the chaotic consciousness may be the last obsession in his heart. Now that the obsession is gone, Bone Dragon has no faith in surviving. The condensed dark air that originally gathered around the body began to disintegrate, and Senran's bones began to dismember. The light in the Bone Dragon's eyes finally dissipated. At the time of dispersal, he finally said a word to the Emperor Linha. "Exhort the entire dragon family, don't try to find that vain realm, I am the end." After saying this, the Bone Dragon dismembered, and the huge bone nirvana was scattered like dust in the broken star field. The ancestor dragon body died, and the most basic blood and vitality of the entire dragon family disappeared was returned. I don't know how many chaos ages can't grow, so that the descendants of the dragon clan, who did not even have a half-ancestor level, are all nourished by the ancestors at this moment. In the base camp of extraterritorial battlefields, more than 10,000 descendants of the dragon clan are patrolling and garrisoning. Each descendant of the dragon tribe directly spans a complete realm, entering elementary and advanced, advanced into the top, top into the half-invincible, and invincible into the peak. And Long Ling, the two dragon clan dragons in Long Qi, who are soaked and invincible, have touched that barrier at the moment and hurriedly waved to create the kingdom of God. They did not dare to enter it for a moment, and seized the slightest breath. It's been too long enough that they have been completely desperate. Now that this opportunity has arisen, they will never give up. On the ground of the broken Luodu starfield, Linha Dragon Emperor silently felt the return of the dragon ancestors. He is still a semi-ancestor, and even the return of his ancestors will not allow him to break through that level of concubine. Because the dark disease in Linha Dragon Emperor was the cause and effect of the ancient curse set by Fengzhu and King Qilin in the War of the Three Races, and it will not decay with the passage of time. Feeling the ancient mantra of the cheekbones in the body, the Dragon Emperor Linha has long been relieved. He will guard the dragons while he is alive, and so will he after death. Looking at the 5 sons of Qilin kneeling and crying, the Emperor Linha had already started to kill. Divine power gathered in his hands, and he walked slowly step by step. With semi-ancestor level strength, the highest realm is none other than the invincible Supreme Peak Kirin 5 sons, who will undoubtedly die. When the Emperor Linha shot his hand to prepare for a blow, the entire Luodu shuddered instantly, the broken sky suddenly collapsed, and the earth split instantly. The Eye of Chaos Spring, which was almost completely sealed by Lao Zun, was suddenly broken, and a large amount of dark and unknown breath burst out. It was so horrible that it could not add energy to penetrate the world. Even the semi-ancestors could not stand near this breath. Jian Wushuang looked at the scene where the world was changing color, and the unpleasant feeling in his heart had already happened. Will this seat take you out of here? In the fiery flames, a figure with a tall and perfect figure stepped out of the flames, and the fire lotus turned into flames bloomed in her whole body. She watched the twinkling eyes of Jian Wushuang's phoenix. Feng Qi came out of the fierce fire nirvana, and his breath reached the top, even showing signs of faint breakthrough. Jian Wushuang shook his head and said positively, "The crisis has not been resolved, I can't leave." Feng Qi shrugged dissatisfied and muttered a wooden murmur. Standing up to look at the weird darkness, Jian Wushuang faintly felt that there was something familiar. The 5 sons of Qilin have already stood up. After listening to the Emperor Linhe, Qilin took a deep look, and the children of the Kirin family who had survived left Luodu's starfield. Jian Wushuang stood up beside Lao Zun and said softly, "Is there a situation?" Lao Zun nodded slightly, his eyes were rarely vigilant. Jian Wushuang did not dare to carelessly and secretly mobilized the divine power to deal with everything that would happen next. The sacred place of the Qilin tribe, Luodu, was completely broken, and the mainland turned into star fragments, drifting into the depths of the universe. Only the chaos spring erupted into a great terror energy. Like a giant gate leading to an unknown realm, a phantom of the sky is slowly condensing in it. The next moment, the virtual shadow stepped out from the eyes of Chaos Spring. Jian Wushuang's pupils shrank sharply, and the phantom that seemed to step out from the ancient times was the phantom that was sealed by the gods of the body in the chaos of time and space. Nearly 20,000 years later, he finally returned from chaos. Just let Jian Wushuang never think of it, the virtual actually returned from the pole of the magical universe. This will be an unimaginable disaster for the divine universe. The lingering black mist dispersed, and Jian Wushuang saw the true appearance of the virtual for the first time. A black gold 3-pronged imperial crown is tied in the long hair, and the angular cheeks are filled with endless evil magnificence. The suit crocheted with black gold thread is hunting without wind. There is no communication, just a glance. Su Shen is pointing away to Xiang Jian Wushuang. The horror of life and death came to mind, and that sense of powerlessness once again brought Jian Wushuang back to his first wave of suppression. As if the evil power of all ages had condensed, even the void collapsed under this finger. And Jian Wushuang also used his strongest sword intention at the first time. From the rules of the universe, the vastness of swordsmanship carries endless power and violently collides with the finger of the virtual god. The dazzling stars stiffly cut into the darkness as thick as the ink, and they hit each other. Everyone was completely shocked. Novel. No one can believe that Jian Wushuang dare to face the real ancestor existence in a half-step invincible state. Is he crazy? He must be crazy. Feng Qi felt a terrible shock in her heart and couldn't believe the thin body. However, that sword Wushuang's most dazzling and pure style of swordsmanship just blocked the virtual for a moment, and then fell apart. That monstrous finger that is enough to suppress eternity is finally coming. Every pore of Jian Wushuang was stained with blood, and the crimson eyes were full of madness. Regardless of all the consequences, he used the prohibition at all costs. Divine power is burning and surging, and the light is like the big sun that makes people dare not look directly at it. Jian Wushuang burned the essence of blood at the cost of life. 3 heads. Chapter 46-29. It was an irreversible forbidden technique. At its own expense, it broke through almost 10 times its own energy. Once in use, it is an endless situation. In order to burn his own half-step invincible and supreme state, he resolutely faced the of emptiness. Like the burning sun, everything in Jian Shuang's body is flourishing. The black robe could not bear Xingji's divine power, shattered on its own, and bear his chest full of godliness. Then, Jian Wushuang showed the tendency to hold the sky with one hand and met the mighty finger. The originally broken star field was directly transformed into the void, and the entire Luodu star field was associated with nearly 20 satellite fields, and eventually became niobium. In this indescribable horror explosion, even the semi-ancestors cannot stand. Regardless, Feng Qi spit out a blood of God, then stunned, and fell into the void. The Emperor Linhe was also overwhelmed, and he fainted after spitting out a large blood. Only 3 bodies stand in this boundless and broken void. The horrible finger of Shushan was finally taken over by the sword unparalleled, and his dazzling pattern was dazzling to the extreme. At the same time, 360 million pores were bleeding, but they were instantly evaporated by Shengji's divine power. The fierce hatred of Jian Wushuang, who did not conceal it, burst out from the bottom of his eyes. In the face of this small, tenacious figure that can take one's finger, even the virtual can't help it. How could the original ants have grown so much? After all, you can't stay. Xian Shen gave another blow, a palm that was enough to cover the earth, and then broken down into the void. In the eyes of Jian Wu's the belligerent meaning was fierce. He was no longer passive, but merged with a style of heavenly gait, and resolutely collided. He is already dead-headed, and 10% of his power is here. Huang's mighty power reflects the sky like daylight. This style of sky gate is extremely sloppy, allowing Jian Wushuang to touch the mysterious edge with a half-step invincible supreme state. He seemed to have returned to the place of tragedy, and felt freely in his own divine power dojo. At this moment, there was only a sigh of relief between the heavens and the earth. "Oh, idiot!" Lao Zun slowly opened his eyes, facing the pole that was about to bloom, and quietly disappeared. The next moment, a dark shadow appeared quietly behind Jian Wushuang. One hand was holding the flesh of his neck, and then disappeared. Boom, boom, boom. The 2 extreme breaths collided, and even the void was annihilated, and the indescribable detonation made it impossible to survive any soul here. The of imagination stood frowning at the sight of the talented one. "It hurts. Jian Wushuang took a sigh of cold air and called with pain. Lao Zun snorted and released the palm of his neck, while at the same time he slaps a strange energy on the chest of Jian Wushuang. Strange and majestic energy enters the body. The burning essence of endless essence blood has even stopped burning. That lost blood seemed to be slowly backtracking, and Jian Wushuang was completely shocked. Before he spoke, a gentle force dragged him away. Feng Qi, who has become a giant phoenix, throws his sword Wushou on his back, and a pair of phoenixes are full of anger. "Do you guys really think that you can be dead as soon as you die? I only say one word. If you die, I will immediately lead the Feng tribe to surrender to the virtual universe, so please do it for yourself." Jian Wushuang scratched his head, embarrassing. The old venerable hand stood in place, looking at the false with the crown of 3 forks, showing bad face. "Give you 3 breaths and roll from my eyes." Shujin looked calm and looked at Lao Zun from a distance, and one side was 10 times better than the previous Tong Tian palm print cover. Lao Zun sighed angrily and waved his sleeves as he stepped forward. Thousands of miles of tremor in the void, the dark thunder easily and instantly defeated the heavenly palm print. "Since you don't roll away, stay." An endless sigh sounded, and on the dark and broken sky, a roaring black water river suddenly fell. As soon as Zujin's eyes were fixed, he seemed to be aware of something, and his eyes flashed with taboo. He no longer stood where he was, with his hands behind his back, and wanted to leave. However, from the dumped Heishui River, a huge arm was suddenly plunged out and slammed directly into the virtual god. With a wave of sleeves in his Chinese clothes, endless virtual forces built up layers of barriers to stand in front of him. However, that giant arm easily penetrated all the defenses and actually bombarded the virtual god. A horrific energy of horror erupted completely, and the virtual could no longer remain indifferent, blocking his arms crossed. There is no magnificent burst, and the sound is dull to the extreme. The sleeves and robes of Zishenwafu were all shattered, embarrassed, and even the trigeminal crown on the head was slightly skewed. The virtual was completely shocked, and he was able to overpower himself with one force. How could there be such a person in these 2 universes? "You don't belong here." Su Shen looked at Lao Zun, word by word. "So what?" Lao Zun stepped forward, quietly. Taking a deep breath, Su Xing stared at him, and then fled into a cloud of black smoke. Lao Zun's eyes narrowed slightly, and he reached out to hit the final blow. Endless lightning appeared above the broken void, and together they sent a penalty. The imaginary who was leaving with a full strength snorted, and most of the black Genoa suit on his body shattered, but instead of stopping, he left at a faster pace. At this point, the entire Luodu starfield was completely dead. Lao Zun looked at the chaotic spring eye rising from the void and scorching and surging, and shot again to block. Cosmic boats like dim stars travel under a starry sky. There was silence on the deck. As a result of this incident, less than 1/10 of the descendants of the Kirin tribe, that is, a large number of middle and high supreme deaths. The remaining Kirin tribe is less than tens of thousands. All the descendants of the Kirin tribe looked at Linha Longdis' eyes and couldn't wait to tear him away. If it wasn't for the dragon ancestral bone dragon, how could his Kirin tribe suffer so much? But now their Kirin clan does not even have a half-ancestor class. What do they use to slay Linha Dragon Emperor? Only waiting for the return of the last astounding Tianhong of the Kirin tribe, they can repay this sea. Buried under the heart of endless hatred, Qi Ting and the remaining 4 sons began to appease the remaining descendants of the tribe. Lao Zun seemed a little tired, and Jian Wushuang condensed into a chair with divine power to make Lao Zun sit down. However, the situation of the dragon and Kirin races is no longer mediation by Jian Wushuang. Xian Shen returned, civil strife was approaching, and even he had a sense of weakness for a while. With the suspicious and overbearing character of the virtual god, a battle that really caused the divine universe to collapse may have begun. Chapter 4630. The burned essence blood was traced back by Lao Zun by special means, but the sequelae that remained were a constant manifestation. With the disorder of the meridians, Jian Wushuang could only comb his teeth bit by bit. Perhaps after seeing his pain, Feng Qi pressed his palm directly behind his back, slowly conveying the vast and pure phoenix breath. Swordless fluttered slightly, then stiffened. "Thank you. I'm really insincere. Do you know how many times the old lady has saved you? Dare to treat the life-saving benefactors like this." Feng Qi was dissatisfied. "I really don't understand you, guy. Even when you get excited, you even take off your clothes." Leaving from Ludu Xingyu, Jian Wushuang carried the last Kirin tribe and sailed to the base camp of the extraterritorial battlefield. With more than 1 month in full force, the spacecraft finally came to the extraterritorial battlefield. Jian Wushuang's most worried scene did not appear. The base camp outside the field was calm. The patrol teams of the Dragon and Feng were still patrolling. Bloodwave Supreme and others are already waiting outside. Jian Wushuang flew to Shun Channel, Shueshan break through the seal back. Bloodwave Supreme and others have changed their face when they heard the words, and then said, "It seems that those who broke through the cracks a few days ago should be virtual gods." Jian Wushuang heard the words, and quickly let the Bloodwave Supreme talk. About 10 days ago, a powerful virtual force emerged from the depths of the divine universe, but did not conflict with the base camp, but went straight through the cracks. The 2 dragon and phoenixes stationed there damaged nearly 100 extreme. Jian Wushuang's brows frowned. It seemed that the virtual had returned to the virtual universe, so the time to launch the next war of catastrophe would be getting closer. Maybe 1,000 years, maybe 10,000 years. Will the false gods be afraid of the existence of divine power in the universe, and dare not start the war of catastrophe, or extend the time? After a little thought, Jian Wushuang rejected the first point. The divine power universe now has only one old respect, which can stand invincible, but the virtual universe is not just the virtual god. The true shadow that was swallowed out in the extreme starfish field of the virtual universe just gave Jian Wushuang great pressure at a glance. The Emperor Mystery, who was so mysterious to the extreme, was afraid that his strength would be much higher than that of the virtual god. In addition to the one who has been promoted to the ancestor level, the virtual universe light is known by Jian Wushuang, and there are 3 ancestor levels. And the divine universe, there is only one old respect. Jian Wushuang didn't dare to think about it anymore. The 3 ancestors of the virtual universe almost made Jian Wushuang feel despair. Bloodwave Supreme signaled to several people, then whispered softly, "The master of Wushuang Palace, there is also good news. 2 dragons have been promoted to the semi-ancestor level recently." What? Semi-ancestor? At this moment, both Funchi and Chilan tribe Chi Ting and others have their eyes wide open. So far, only Feng Chi is a half-ancestor of the Feng tribe, and Qishan of the Kiran tribe has died. There is no half-ancestor, and the Dragon tribe has 3 half-ancestors. 2.5 ancestors, which means that the dragons once again stepped on the soles of the Phoenix and Kiran. The Emperor Linha heard the words, and his depressed face also stretched a lot. God bless my dragon family, bless my dragon family. There was a sadness in the eyes of Qi Ting, and his firm heart began to shake. Feng Chi frowned and wondered what she was thinking. After Jian Wushuang heard the news, his complexion also stretched a lot. The existence of semi-ancestors can also affect the battle situation, which can greatly reduce the loss of living power. Sword warriors have a premonition, the return of the virtual god. At most 1,000 years, the war of catastrophe will start again. During this time, breaking through the realm is his most urgent task at the moment. At the same time, after the last battle, most of the Shrine of Life was almost damaged, and Jian Wushuang decided to assemble and repair it within this time. The cosmic boats leave from the base camp, and the assembled orders are scattered in the divine universe like the fire of stars. He wants to tell all the Sansho of the divine universe, as well as the clans of stubborn resistance, to do their best to deal with the fiercest battle in the future. After commanding all of this, Jian Wushuang flew directly to the Wazibai, breaking through that level with great concentration. Long before the burning of blood and the face of the virtual god, Jian Wushuang felt the unbreakable state and began to shake a little. In any case, this time we must break through half-step invincible and enter the invincible realm. Jian Wushuang has some expectations. He can shake the semi-ancestors only in a half-step invincible state. What about the invincible state? Sitting in front of a huge monument without a word, Jian Wushuang closed his eyes and began to realize the previous breakthrough point. Dao Dao Hua Yun emerged from his body, making a slight ripple. And Lao Zun still stood behind Jian Wu's body calmly, as if falling into a deep sleep. The years passed, and 500 years passed. During this period, the cosmic boats that left the base camp began to return, and brought back with a strong strength of casual repair. They are either the clans that were destroyed or the monks who survived the last battle of the Holocaust. Everyone has great strength. It is just the first batch of returning cosmic boats that brought back nearly 50,000 monks. Ordinary Supremes have reached as much as 5,000, not to mention that there are nearly 20 people who participated in the first Holocaust, and then the Invincible Supreme. With the appearance and joining of each monk, it means that the war of catastrophe is one more chance and more fierce at the same time. Every monk who came to the extraterrestrial battlefields already knew that this war would bet on the lives and luck of generations of the magical universe. They couldn't lose, so they got together here and made it to the battle. As the first batch of spacecraft returned, the second and third batches returned in turn. One monk went down one after another from the cosmic boat, and at the same time, there was a steady stream of monk-style meals and lodgings, set foot in each star field, and came step by step from each star field. Set foot in front of the base camp of the extraterritorial battlefield, everyone's face has its own expression, but the most is silence and perseverance. Every monk knows where he will be in the next battle. In the face of an enemy that is several times as powerful, they don't know if their death can be exchanged for a breath of offspring. But even so, they still came. Seeing that nearly 300,000 monks have come to this extraterrestrial battlefield, Bloodwave Supreme and others have already burst into tears. No one knows how far the war at the expense of life and death will proceed, because most people will die peacefully or violently in the process. The huge extraterrestrial battlefield has not become lively because of a large number of monks. Here, forever belongs only to eternal death and coldness. Chapter 4631. For 800 years, a steady stream of monks came to the extraterritorial battlefield, and the cities rose up around the base camp. The first 300,000 monks have also assembled more than 2 million. At the same time, there are many familiar forces joining, making the Blood Wave Supreme. The Jyoti Pavilion, which had been destroyed after the last battle of the Holocaust, reappeared, red ear supreme, purple hair supreme joined in turn. Shinkong Jianzong, who was on the run, also rushed to the extraterritorial battlefield. Wu Jianxian, as always, just added a sense of annihilation in indifference. The ancestor by apes smelled the order of the Life Shrine Assembly, and in the first 100 years he carried his children and grandchildren to the extraterrestrial battlefield. The most surprising thing about Bloodwave Supreme is that the Taishu Temple, which thought that it had been a virtual universe, did not surrender. The Taishu Emperor was just as evil as tens of thousands of years ago. Seeing that Bloodwave Supreme not only lost his body, but broke through the Invincible Supreme and achieved the position of half-ancestor, he also didn't say much, but just asked to see Jinshuang's sword. Bloodwave Supreme did not refuse. After pointing the direction of the sword Wushuang with his fingers, the Emperor Taishu stepped forward. Afterwards, the drunk man Lao Qier, who was swaying in the sky, lingered around, a broken snowflake sword carrying a gourd, a tattered shirt, and 2 flushes hanging on his face. He was drunker than 20,000 years ago, but anyone who knew him knew that he would never be drunk. The sword alliance created by the ancient road of the starry sky where the sword Wushuang is located has all arrived. The 9-star holy place, the 9-star holy sun, and the Mo Luo family have also come. At this point, for more than 800 years, nearly 3 million monks have been assembled. It is often that one star field can give birth to a supreme divine realm. At this moment, there are more than 200,000. Everything today is far beyond the scale of any catastrophe. The infinite star field of the entire divine power universe, even for distant places, has contributed its own power. The position of the Supreme Master of Life, temporarily adjusting the huge number of monks. The wordless monument near the base camp almost became a landscape, and every monk who came to the extraterritorial battlefield came here to watch. Most of them secretly wept. The Dragon and Feng tribe jointly dispatched more than 200 clan disciples to take turns guarding Jian Wushuang, and the Feng ancestor Feng Qi was waiting here. After more than 900 years of being so busy, no one feels boring. All monks are breaking through themselves as much as possible. When do you say Jian Wushuang can wake up? Will there be any problem? A super sophisticated overlord stood not far from the monument and looked at the sword sitting like a clay sculpture. Unparalleled. The Jiao Xing Zi, who is also in the Sword Alliance, hugged his arms and said quietly, "You're better to worry about him than to worry about yourself first. He is a monster of heaven and earth." The overlord pouted his lips, glanced at the Jiao Jia Wang not far away, and then lowered his voice. "You said, is Sword Jinshuang today more powerful than Jiao Jia Wang?" Jiao Xingzi glanced at the overlord, then shook his head. "I don't know, but Jian Wushuang has never let me down. Today he is already the master of the Palace of Life. Do you know what that means? And I heard that without the sword unparalleled before the retreat, it can already compete with the semi-ancestors." Waking up the dreamer in a word, the overlord suddenly realized that there is a semi-ancestor in the current life temple, but it is even more terrible than his own ancestor. And Sword Wushuang can take the position of the palace master, which means... The overlord didn't dare to continue to think about it. Although Jian Wushuang was also an immortal genius in his heart, it was too scary to be able to compete with the semi-ancestors in a half-step invincible state. The wine gourd was taken from the tip of the madman Lao Qier, and the King of 9 Kings paid a respectful respect to the back of Jian Wushuang, and then drank a large mouthful. "How are you? My wine is not strong?" Lao Qier asked with a smile. King Jiulong grinned and said, "Lie." The old beggar was extraordinarily happy, as if he heard the best compliment, grabbing the wine gourd and filling himself with a big mouthful. After a long drink, the old beggar was drunk. "In my long life I have only fought the Holocaust once, that is, the last battle in which the of the sky fell. Do you know why I didn't take part in the first Holocaust?" King Jiujia shook his head. The old beggar grinned. "That's because I'm too selfish." Selfish? The king of Jiulong was confused. As if in remembrance, Lao Qier's eyes seemed to flourish in the past. "I became famous before the first Holocaust, but I did not participate in the first Holocaust. At that time, I was in the world of all things, but advertised I am independent and everything has nothing to do with me. It wasn't until the start of the first battle of the Holocaust that I realized vaguely that everyone was not independent. At that time, the divine universe was also half occupied, and everything I loved was destroyed in silence. It was during that catastrophe that I stayed out of sight but saw the glory of a group of people. For the first time, the empty Tao heart had pursuit. Until the last catastrophe, I finally fought side by side with them, but they all left one by one, only I was alive. I used to think that if I grew up step by step, the ultimate purpose was just to protect. It would be too tedious. But fortunately, the long years taught me a lesson and made me realize that now I have finally come to this road completely. Laukir has always smiled. I was a young man and I witnessed the era god who turned the tide with my own strength. Now my greatest hope is to witness the rise of the next Eurasian god and lead the whole divine universe lives well. Speaking of which, Laukir turned away and walked away. Selfish guys like me hope that the divine universe is getting less and less. Jiao Wang Jingjing watched the drunk man Laukir who was attacking the gangster shirt, and an inexplicable blue shirt swordsman overlapped it. Perhaps the old beggar in his youth was so wanton. Returning to the king of 9 calamities, God looked at the figure sitting in front of the monument without words. You guys, I am looking forward to witnessing your growth. The years of 1,200 years pass by, but people change between spring and autumn, and Shuo Shui replaces Yangchun. But for these monks who have been on the way to the monastic road, it is just a little bit of mood. The figure sitting under the monument has finally moved in this long time. The falling dust lightly raised, and a trace of the dignified godliness surged spontaneously. Chapter 46-32. The streamlined divine pattern is like a flowing river, rising and flowing with the end of the sword. An old statue like a clay statue suddenly opened his eyes and looked at his back, then went silent again. Then Feng Qi, after perceiving Jian Wushuang's breath fluctuation, also awakened from deep sleep. What the is this guy? Haven't even woke up yet? Feng Qi looked puzzled, far enough to watch Jian Wushuang far away before giving up. As the years went by, the sword-like long river flowing around Jian Wushuang became even more pure, like a star emitting a blue glow. His breath was even longer, and he spit out a sip slowly every 100 years. And that layer of emptiness is gradually weakening. The monks who gathered to come to the extraterritorial battlefield gradually fixed themselves at 5 million people. The base camp is not enough to allow all monks to settle down, and the Bloodwave Supreme will be able to lead the Dragon and Phoenix family to expand. Nearly 60 magnificent big cities have become the Arch Guard, and they have risen around the base camp. All monks are waiting. It's been more than 1,000 years, and the talent of Jianwushuang should also wake up. The overlord thought and felt his chin. The patriarch's ancestor, White Ape, patted him angrily. You thought it was so easy to eat and drink water for the promotion of Invincible Realm. I think it took a dozen chaotic periods to promote the Invincible Realm of the old man. The overlord touched his head. I have a feeling that Jian Wushuang will wake up soon. The White Ape didn't speak again, and looked forward to Jian Wushuang's back. Little guy, don't break through that invincible state. In these 1,000 years, the battlefield outside the region is not peaceful. As a scout pioneer, the vagrants constantly broke through the cracks, trying to find out the situation. Bloodwave Supreme has long been prepared. Each 100 Supremes are 1 echelon, a total of 10 echelons, and a total of 1,000 Supremes are stationed in the cracks. As more scouts rushed out of the cracks and frictions increased from small to large, every monk was vaguely aware that the worldwide catastrophe battle was about to start. At the same time, Bloodwave Supreme did not forget to complete the previous deployment of Jian Wushuang. The 2 dragons, the Dragon Clan who had just been promoted to the semi-ancestor level, and the 2 Dragonkis led the team, and kept clearing the vagrants stationed in the divine universe. The systems practiced by the 2 sides of the universe are different, and the restriction of virtual forces has also caused the virtual men of the virtual universe to go too far. This also greatly saves time and the degree of casualties. After processing all the things, The Supreme Master of Bloodwaves got tired from the base camp so far. He hasn't rested much for more than 1,000 years. Even the semi-ancestor's body is a bit sick. The Heavenly Supreme and the Great Axe accompanied him. You said, how long will it take for the Master of the Wushuang Palace to wake up from Go Sit? Tian Yao Supreme said. The Great Axe shook his head. It's hard to say. Invincible Supreme is a genius. With the horrible qualifications of the Master of the Wushuang Palace, I'm afraid it will be more difficult to break through than us. Bloodwave Supreme laughed. Both of you guessed wrong. In my opinion, there are at most 2 years left, and the Master of the Shuangsong Palace can wake up. Looking at the extremely bloodless Supreme, the two nodded with smiles. Sure enough, in the second year of the scene, the sword, unparalleled sitting under the wordless monument, suddenly wake up. The long flowing river of godlike patterns is flowing like a clear stream of air, translating into billions of stars. The unclear road rules in the battlefield outside the territory are reshaped, and Baoguang rises and rises around the sword unparalleled. The dim and broken void was rarely clear for a moment, and a special rule of Avenue blessed him. In the base camp, all the invincible Supremes at this moment, all looked at the scene that washed up the lead. Every invincible Supreme was shocked. They clearly remembered how terrible the thunder and punishment that came when they were first admitted to the Invincible Supreme, and they would be embarrassed in the carelessness of promotion. But why is this promotion to Invincible Supreme different from their methods? As if the Emperor was crowned, the supreme divine punishment of thunder and thunder turned into a monstrous divine power slowly falling, and the vast divine power Huamen was bathed in 1,000,000 miles around. At this moment, all the magic weapons worn by monks trembled slightly like worship. Looking at the figure hanging in the sky like a round sun, everyone who knew the sword without a smile smiled. This guy who has stood up to adversity and ran all the way so far has really not disappointed anyone. Belonging to the Invincible Supreme Avenue, Jian Wushuang's dazzling divine patterns slowly restrained. Standing with Lan Lan in all coldness, seeing this scene, could not help tears. It was his husband and his pride. As the divine power slowly dissipated, the frost was too cold to hold back, ready to rush forward. However, a magnificent flaming figure took the lead in front of Jian Wushuang and cast a gratifying and admiring look. Cold as frosty eyes, footsteps stayed where they were. What are you doing? Don't you want your husband? Lan Lan on the side chuckled, then grabbed the frosty wrist, and rushed to Xiang Jian Wushuang with everyone. Sure enough, I didn't let this seat down. It was just 1,000 years before I could break through the invincible realm. It was really a monster. Feng Qi nodded with satisfaction. Jian Wushuang smiled slightly. It's a fluke. Feng Qi also said, in the beginning, you could suppress the semi-ancestors in a half-step invincible supreme state. Now it is invincible supreme, isn't it? I don't think it has changed as much as you think, Jian Wushuang said. While talking, the Life Shrine, the Dragon and Phoenix clan, and some powerful monks gathered. Looking at so many monks now, Jian Wushuang did not respond for a moment. Bloodwave Supreme laughed, and then meticulously explained what happened over the past 1,500 years to Jian Wushuang. Until the final words Jian Wushuang slowly returned to God, whispered, "This is the monks assembled, the monks of the divine universe." The few people remaining in the Temple of Life were all filled with emotion. From the beginning of the single tree, to the joining of the Dragon and Phoenix clan, and now to the assembly of nearly 5 million monks, everything is like a dream to Jian Wushuang. He never dared to expect this situation, and his heart was surging for a while. 5 million monks assembled here just to break through under the weight of the virtual universe. The nearly 200,000 Supreme Masters are almost all the chi of the divine universe. This battle cannot be lost, nor can it be lost. But among the monks who gradually gathered in front of the monument, a slight commotion suddenly sounded, and then the crowd gradually separated to the sides, leaving a way. The two strong breaths made everyone look down. Chapter 46-33. The two statures that came slowly were breathtaking and restrained, and the statures were all hidden under the wide black robe. With only one glance, Jian Wushuang clearly felt that these two figures were semi-ancestors. The atmosphere in front of the monument was condensed, and the needle drop was audible. Bloodwave Supreme is also a little dazed. He doesn't know when there are two semi-ancestors in the assembled monk army. Judging by the surging breath, I'm afraid it wasn't for the congratulations. Bloodwave Supreme did not neglect, and hurried forward to the front road. Who are the two? The two reached down and pulled down their hoods at the same time, each showing an old face. The light is the light, the short is the waist. The two oldest elders spoke at the same time, their voices were slightly muffled. They are really too old, as if the chaos had only existed since the beginning of the day, and the blood wave almost couldn't find the breath they didn't deliberately hide. We are the old friends of the universe. We should have entered the cycle already, but in the end we couldn't rest assured. We borrowed some chi from the universe to wish our last strength. The two old men spoke at the same time, their voices were peaceful. Jian Wushuang heard the words and arched, "Thank you two old elders for their help, and the Palace of Life is grateful." The two elders bowed their heads slightly, turning their gaze from Bloodwave Supreme to him. "Are you the master of the Palace of Life?" Sword Wushuang nodded. "You can reach the invincible and supreme state at this age, and the afterlife is awesome." The thinner Xiangqing old man nodded, but he immediately turned his head. "But the old man thought that you led the Palace of Life to lead the next. The war was not a good move." As soon as the words came out, people who knew each other with Swordsman Wu Jian looked at him. The Emperor Jinwu and Emperor Taishu were all looking at him from the wall, watching how he dealt with it. Jian Wushuang didn't care and laughed. "What do the old seniors think? It's very simple. The Lord of the Palace of Life Shrine was surrendered and was won by the semi-ancestors in this seat," said the relatively sturdy Xiangliang. Jian Wushuang heard the words and did not speak. Feng Qi, the ancestor of the Feng tribe, even chuckled. "I quit and did not participate in the competition of Lao Zizi." When the Dragon Emperor came to the river, the same should be said. At present, the dragon enemy does not want to participate in that unnecessary competition. In my opinion, the responsibility of the shrine is left to the master of the warrior's palace. The two half-ancestors, Longyu and Longqi, also took a step back and stood behind the Emperor Linhe. When Bloodwave Supreme opened his mouth with the light and desolate old man, he had no good feelings. He pressed his heart into anger and said coldly, "The Lord of the Wushuang Palace is the successor designated by the previous Lord of the Daoyan Palace. No one can change this." At one time, 5 of the 7 semi-ancestors on the field rejected directly. And the two old men who are light and desolate are still calm. This battle is about the life and death of the divine universe. As an old friend of the God of God, I will never watch the divine universe interrupt in his hand, so the old man must never don't budge. He is just an invincible supreme. Although he is extremely talented, he looks like an ant in the eyes of the semi-ancestors, not to mention that the virtual universe has real ancestors like the virtual God. How much can he play? Strength is an insurmountable sound of nature. The low voice cut through the entire battlefield outside the region, and the two were in the light of the other and directly released the breath that belongs to the semi-ancestor class. For a time, nearly 1 million monks gathered in front of Wubi Bay, all infected by the words of the two. Yeah, even if his roots are even better, after all, he is only an invincible supreme. Even the semi-ancestors may not be able to take over. How can he lead the magical universe to win this battle? After hearing the last sentence of the two, Feng Qi couldn't help but laugh out loud, and the other half-ancestors were also full of weird faces. Between all realms is a ridge of gully, but Jian Wushuang is obviously not in this list. Even if Feng Qi, who has already achieved a semi-ancestor level, first thought of Jian Wushuang when confronting Jian Wushuang for the first time, it was not but how to escape. The scene where the daring half-step invincible state shakes the virtual is too shocking. However, Jian Wushuang did not respond very much. After listening to these words, he slowly said, "Old senior, what if I don't give up my place in the palace? The old man will only force you to make way." Afterwards, the two most pure and powerful divine powers emerged, and the divine power belonging to the semi-ancestor class shocked most monks in an instant. Don't blame the old man just doesn't want to see the divine power universe going to destruction. Xiang Qing and Xiang Lu said in the same voice. When the blood wave reached the words, when he was about to take a step, he was stopped by Jian Wushuang. I will handle it properly, rest assured. After that, Jian Wushuang took a step forward, and the vast and mighty spirit of the invincible realm also surged up. The rising divine power turned out to be faint and light, and the two Lu Xiang resisted each other. In this case, the main sword of the Palace of Life is unparalleled and willing to be taught. The two didn't talk much, they set foot on the line, and the power of the semi-ancestors was heavy toward Jian Wushuang. Nearly 1 million monks gathered voluntarily yielded, leaving a large void. Dare to cope with the existence of the semi-ancestors in the invincible realm? Is that kid crazy? The pupil of Emperor Taishu condensed suddenly and couldn't believe what he was about to see. With one enemy and two, is there no problem with Jian Wushuang? The overlord was shocked and murmured softly. At this moment, everyone has determined the final situation in their hearts. Only the disciples of Life Shrine who participated in that war had a look of indifference, as if they had seen through the ending. Bloodwave Supreme said quietly, "Stop fighting with war may be the best choice right now." The two semi-ancestral breaths of the sharp edge, once locked the sword's retreat, and strive to defeat it in one way. Wushuang's verdant green vine is centered on two people. Yu reads www. Akanshu. Calm spreads around all of a sudden, and it is built by their dojo field. In this area, enemies can be cut substantially directly. The sword has no two-sided color and calmness. Looking at the scene right now, I couldn't help but hook the corner of my mouth. A layer of dim and imperceptible breath quietly climbed over the entire void, the gifted magical power of the sword unparalleled. The primitive universe has concealed everyone's eyes. Today's gifted supernatural powers, and even the rest of the supernatural powers, have been retempered by Jian Wushuang in this 1,000 years of enlightenment. Even the strongest ancestors still fell into the field of sword unparalleled. For the magical universe, we must not keep our hands, be careful. Xiang Qingshan said, while a huge vine sprang up from the realm, rushing towards the sword Wushuang. Chapter 46-34. The divine power rising from the sky is like a mountain overturning. Even the invincible Supreme here is subconsciously taking a half step back to avoid spreading to himself. It's time to end. Taishu Emperor whispered, but then the most unwilling scene in that heart appeared. I saw Jian Wushuang still standing in place, exhaling a mighty taro sword with a mighty sword. Door dash. With a slight whistle, the mountain-like vines split directly into the middle. Jian Wushuang didn't stay at all, stood up directly, holding the Tai Luo divine sword in his hand, facing the two who were light, and the two were desolate, suddenly cut off. The majestic and vast sword-like tears of the void, like a giant wave, fell directly. The two waved their hands at the same time, and numerous vines formed barriers to stop them. Hao Feng Jian easily tore off nearly 100 layers of barriers, and then gradually dispersed. Sword Wushuang turned back and stood with his hands, looking calm. Look at each other lightly and stare at each other, and then condensed, being able to be the Lord of the Palace of Life at this age, it really has some skills, but your skills are still not enough for us. More immense divine power surging, impregnating the divine powers of countless chaos ages, more inclusive and broad. The intangible half-ancestor's breath surging into the void, transfiguring the transparent chain vines, twitching toward the sword unparalleled like a punishment. Taking a deep breath, he retracted the sacred sword again, carrying his hands to face the heavenly punishment, step by step towards the light and the desert. The chain vine carrying the might of heaven and earth slammed heavily on Jian Wushuang's body, and the imaginary body disappeared. Each hit had a semi-ancestor's full blow, leaving no trace of him at all. Huang God pattern emerges from the sword's unparalleled body, and the purple Sichuan word demon anomalies in the eyebrows. Xiang Qingxiangwen can't believe that this guy who is just invincible, how could he be able to withstand the whipping in their field? You know, Even the semi-ancestors are afraid to do this. Maybe I don't want to waste any more time. Jian Wushuang is holding the sky with one hand, and the heavenly gate of one is coming. Quality realm Tianmen. Tianmen, which is more solid than before, seems to really exist. The divine power projected from each beam seems to be the most fiery day. All monks are watching this scene in shock. That is not the power that Invincible Supreme can radiate, or even the semi-ancestors may not be able to comprehend it. After seeing the vast expanse that was discovered in the splendid sky gate, Xiangqing and Xianghuang gave up the resistance directly and looked at the sword unparalleled. The light of the polar day let all monks in front of the inscriptionless tablet close their eyes subconsciously. When the polar day disappeared, everything was over. Jian Wushuang stood in front of Xiangqing and arched with a smile, "Thank you for your mercy." Xiangqing and Xianghuang have not recovered from the shock, and at the same time whispered, "Why, can you master the ancestral art in an invincible and supreme state?" Jian Wushuang did not have any concealment, saying, "That's because God of the Earth gave me all his lives' insights before he left." So it is, so it is. The two groaned for a long time before finally getting ready to leave. The two old predecessors stayed. Jian Wushuang stopped them. "The divine power universe needs you. I urge you to stay and defend the enemy together." Xiang Qingxiangwang looked at each other and then smiled. "It is natural. Even if you drive the old man away, the old man will definitely not leave the extraterritorial battlefield. This is our destiny." Looking at the two figures who fled away, Jian Wushuang not without emotion. The battlefield outside the world is dead, but the eyes of every monk are scorching, and the master of the palace of life, who can shake two semi-ancestor-level strong men in an invincible state, hits each monk invisibly. Agent Strong Heart Needle. It turns out that the divine universe really has hope. "My God, boss, you are too great." The overlord flew directly from a distance, and Jian Shuang came to bear hug fiercely. Jian Wushuang smiled, "Sooner or later you can do it." The following patriarch ancestor White Ape directly pulled the overlord from Jian Wushuang, without good airs. "You kid, you will always be so rude. Isn't it that I can't help seeing the boss?" The overlord smirked. The White Ape was sighing with emotion. It has only been tens of thousands of years without seeing him, and the Lord of Wushuang Palace has grown up to this day. It is really a blessing for the divine universe. Jian Wushuangdo, the White Ape is superb, the war is coming, and Jianmo can only do his best to improve himself. The White Ape nodded, then glanced left and right and whispered, "How do you have a chance of winning against the of falsehood?" Jian Wushuang stunned, and then smiled bitterly, "No one in Chengdu, and now I can only guarantee that I can retreat from his hands." The White Ape apparently responded too, and patted his head awkwardly, "Look at my head, it's almost getting old." Jian Wushuang knew the anxieties of the ancestors of the White Apes, and then groaned and then said, "The White Ape is supreme, and rest assured that when the of emptiness comes, someone will deal with it." The White Ape nodded supremely and stopped questioning. He never doubted Jian Wushuang's words. After half a day of embarrassment with everyone, Jian Wushuang entered the base camp. At this moment, more than 1,500 years have passed since he sat under the wordless monument, and the premonition that the catastrophe is imminent is getting stronger and stronger. Listening to the constant news from the garrison in the cracks, Jian's eyes sink like water. Just as he was going to take a trip to the cracks, the urgent training from the first echelon rang through the giant hall. Listening to that sharp training, everyone's mood fell to the bottom of the valley instantly. This kind of urgent training is the highest level, indicating that the virtual universe has already invaded. Is this day finally here? Pressing the agitation in the heart, Jian Wushuang slowly walked out of the hall. Everyone was dignified, and the monks in dozens of cities gathered silently in front of the base camp, like a bit of spark gathering. Nearly 5 million monks looked like a sculpture, none of them flinched, staring into the dark abyss. Jian Wushuang finally looked back at the countless monks who were crushing the sky, and added the voice of divine power, resounding completely in the sky of the sky. "All glory we do today." A short sentence completely ignited the hearts of all monks. Everything that is in mind is vain. A variety of strong divine powers soared into the sky. A total of 5 million monks condensed the fortunes of various star domains, and at this moment exudes the most magnificent divine power. The void in the whole extraterrestrial battlefield is trembling. This time, the battle of the Holocaust may be the last one. Chapter 4635. Divine power poured freely into the void. Headed by Jian Wushuang, the 5 million strong monks gathered in the cracks and made their best in one battle. Stepping on the outermost side of the extraterrestrial battlefield, an equally majestic force is permeating. There are 10 columns in total. At the moment, nearly 8 branches have fallen, and more than 10 ordinary supremes are fleeing desperately. Behind them, nearly 100 vanities who act as scout pioneers are struggling to kill. The sword has no double-sided color and is cold. Suddenly, the void rose, and a huge palm print killed the hundreds of traces of vanity directly. All monks were shocked. They shot hundreds of vanity in one palm. I'm afraid the semi-ancestors couldn't do it? Emperor Taishu and Emperor Jinwu all looked at the figure under the black robe with a complex look. In just tens of thousands of years, he has grown to the existence that he needs to look up to. When the virtual forces dissipated as much as possible, the more than 10 supremes hurriedly ran to the front of Jian Wushuang. One of the older elders panicked and said, "Wushuang Palace Lord, the big thing is bad, the void crack has cracked, and they have already attacked from the crack." Jian Wushuang heard his words frown, and then rushed forward, with more than 5 million monks behind him. Void fissures are located at the junction of the divine universe and the unreal universe. In that mysterious zone, both the divine and virtual powers are weak. When the forces of the divine universe rushed to the junction, all the monks could not help but take a breath. I saw that at the junction of the crack and enchantment, a celestial abyss had been cracked smoothly to both sides, just like the heavenly gate of heaven, and countless vain forces escaped. The black army of vain soldiers, like the dark fog covering the sky, emerged from the cracks of the door that day. Those old friends also appeared. Surging in a black mist, the 8 desolate lords led more than 200,000 scouts, and looked away from each other with the sword unparalleled. 200,000 scouts, there are nearly 50,000 traces of vanity. Their role is to act as a sharp knife, fiercely into the heart of the divine universe. The 2 half-ancestors who were almost killed by Jian Wushuang with their own power in the past were now crushed by the dark army of virtual soldiers. Meet the blood feud, the 8 desolate emperor and that 2-in-1 deceit, almost anxious to directly kill the sword without twining to pieces. However, these are not over yet. The endless stream of virtual men is boundless, as if connected to the sky, stepping out of the virtual universe. The immense pressure was on every monk's heart, but no one took a half step back, silent and dead. On the top of the army of virtual soldiers, the virtual transformed from hundreds of millions of virtual forces seemed like a demon to come into the world, and the star-like red eyes penetrated 9 days and 10 places and looked at Jian Wushuang. And on the side of the virtual god, a shocking virtual shadow also condensed. With the black mist surging down, a majestic treasurer wearing a black gold suit and crown on his head appeared. Jian Wushuang's eyes synced fiercely, and that was just a glance in the starfish realm to scare the eternal emperor, and now it is also here. The 2 ancestors straddled the world, and their appearance almost made all monks despair. Next, the one with 6 arms of rules swarming behind him, with 6 members of the swarming organization coming at the same time. 3 ancestors. The supreme existence of the supreme, 3 in the camp of the virtual universe appeared 3. The heavens and earth changed, and even when it first came, it shattered the void. There is no place to hold 3 ancestors. At this moment, even Jian Wushuang's heart felt a sense of weakness. The ancestor is the existence that truly surpasses the rules, and even the semi-ancestors can hardly cause any harm to it. The 3 ancestors are really terrible. Is it innocent to die, my magical universe? At this moment, all the monks were already frustrated. Taking a deep breath, Jian Wushuang took the lead to release the vast divine power, and the unmatched divine power swayed up with the divine pattern, but it was the faint barrier of the invading virtual force. At the same time, the Feng tribe Fengqi, the dragon tribe Linhe the dragon emperor, the blood wave is supreme, the phase is light and the phase is deserted. At this moment, a total of 7 half-ancestors release the divine treasure. The emptiness is magnificent, and the divine power belonging to the divine universe has blossomed a tough side at this moment. Along with the surging divine power, Lao Zun took a step forward, and a black water treasure that shook the sky transformed from behind him. A strange but majestic energy dissipates the imaginary force that has dissipated almost instantly. All monks looked at this scene in shock, and then their hot but fierce eyes rose again. It turns out that our divine power universe also has ancestors. The ancestral ancestor White Ape's eyes were reddish, and at the same time, the divine power that belonged to the invincible supreme peak rose. Emperor Taixus' normal and angry face also slightly raised the corners of his mouth. After seeing the statue of the elder respect, Yao Yao stared at the scarlet eyes, and everything that he had experienced in the polar starfish rushed into his heart again. Did he get abandoned from there too? There is no answer. The opponent in the bite heart is not Lao Zun. As early as when he set foot on this extraterrestrial battlefield, he locked Jian Wushuang. The terrible growth of this monster finally made it feel unusual for devouring even the devouring organization. However, today's battle, Jian Wushuang must die. That day he escaped from the hands of Lao Zun, and the virtual was able to recover. His inner fear caused him to confront Lao Zun in the first time. And the mysterious, the emperor who has been manipulating behind the scenes so far, looks a little weird in the eyes of Lao Zun. For a time, the cold and damaged regional diplomatic circles gathered the full power of the two sides of the universe. This will be the most expansive Bloomberg battle since Chaos. Whether it is the defeating party or the defeating party, it will certainly pay a terrible price. Here, if I return, I will let you go all the way, otherwise it will inevitably die here. Hong Zhongdalu's voice resounded from the mouth of Shushan. He was high above him, carrying an endless evil spirit in his magnificence. But no one in the divine universe responded. Everyone had a dead heart in their eyes, and scoffed at the words of the virtual god. Will the skin be attached without hair? Survival of the cold, when the magical universe is completely occupied, and anyone will just be a plaything tortured at will. Sword Wushuang laughed loudly, showing disdain in a pair of pure golden eyes. Below, tirelessly, and invariably occupy my divine power universe for trillions of years. Everyone knows the ugly heart. Now it is before the two armies' persuasion is indeed despicable. The sword has no double character like a knife, cut to the entire virtual universe. The false sank and waved his hand to lower the punishment. Chapter 46-36. The void collapsed, and the blow with great terror power went straight to the sword without a cover. Jian Wushuang did not dodge, but directly held up the sky with one hand to meet the horrific blow of the virtual god. The red-gold divine power collided with the dark imaginary force, and everyone just felt that the void under their feet was trembling, and they all stared forward. The imaginary result did not appear. Jian Wushuang has been as stable as Ding Haitian needle, and he was destroyed by him directly. All the monks were boiling, and Feng Qi's ancestors were even more surprised. The sword, unparalleled sword that could barely resist the false gods before, was even more scary now. And his growth eventually made the three ancestors strong guards. I can't stay here. The army of sprawling vain forces has been assembled, and the tragic song is about to ring in the remote battlefield. With the Taro Excalibur raised high by the sword without hands, the monks behind him took the lead in launching the attack. The endless divine power turned into an arrow that is difficult to turn back, and nailed it into the army of Su Shi's army. This is the battle of the most extreme divine power and ineffective power. A total of 7.5 ancestors released their realms in the first place. Feng Qi turned into a giant phoenix covering the sky. With a clear voice, carrying thousands of children of the Phoenix family, resolutely charged. The most fierce nirvana of the world between heaven and earth, spread among the army of virtual soldiers. Anyone who is contaminated by flames, even the six-marked virtual lord, is destroyed in it. The Linha Dragon Emperor re-illusioned the Dragon of the Destiny, and each time his body flipped, it was enough to tear the sky and destroy one realm. As if the claws of the giant pillars descended, hundreds of traces of vanity turned into blood mist. Bloodwave Supreme vibrated his arms, countless blood shadows quietly covered the void as in the quagmire field, and any vanity in this blood shadow field was unknowingly weakened. Heavenly Supreme, Great Axe Supreme, Patriarch White Ape, Emperor Taishu, Emperor Jinwu, a top powerful man with 1,000,000 chaotic era, led the monk army and developed along the semi-ancestor level blood avenue, resolutely rushed into the army of Sushur. This was the most terrible death battle. There was no second way except for one party's death. Jian Wushuang is in the forefront of the monk army, and he is full of sacred lines, and his huge treasure protects the monks below him. The invisible sword emerged from his right palm. Wushuang Kendo, Xinghe Lake, high sword rises to the sky. The vast stars and the galactic galaxy are all blooming in this star-shaped sword at this moment. This sword is broken from ancient times to modern times, which brings him too much wantonness and misery. This sword is awe-inspiring. It is his sword Wushuang's own kendo. The ancestor must also lower my eyebrows when I see. The indescribable kendo is swept across the void, pointed to by the sword front. Hundreds of miles are my territory. This style directly turned 100,000 virtual men into fly ash. Cut out a road soaked with blood and covered with corpses. Originally, he was going to block Jian Wushuang's Bite 1, but he hasn't acted yet. The black water treasure is floating in front of the three ancestors. Come together. Lao Zun looked at them indifferently, concisely. Su Shen suddenly sank. Look for death. At the end of the story, Supreme Ancestor's strength rose to the sky, and countless secretive runes emerged from the body of the Xian. At the same time, 2 chains of engraved streamer runes were smashed from the back of the virtual god, carrying the power of the broken void to the old respect. At the same time, Yenny also moved, and the 6 regular arms behind him turned into virtual light, pressing down towards Lao Zun. The crown above his head was calm until the terrible Bite Emperor, and he also shot at the same time. A black beam that was almost to the extreme suddenly shot out of the sleeve of his black gold suit. 3 ancestral offensives overwhelmed Lao Zun. Under the attack, the nether sky dome was broken, and the ripples of destruction caused the starry void to collapse. Facing this killing offensive, Lao Zun's gaze turned from the previous indifference to the dignified. The Blackwater scepter turned into a ripple barrier, blocking directly in front of him. The 3 devastating offensives disappeared like mud cows into the sea. Lao Zun raised his hand to remove the barrier, and a pair of completely black pupils directly locked Bit 1. Persimmons must be softly pinched and people must be weak. Due to the constraints of the Avenue rules, Lao Zun must break through the blockade and containment as soon as possible under the limits of his own endurance. The one that has just been promoted to the ancestor is the best choice. Eyed by Lao Zun, the past came to my heart again, and even the arm of the rule that grew back behind was faintly hurt. I swallowed a bit of jealousy in the bottom of my eyes, but more crazy. Even if I am not alone against you, but now 3 people overwhelm you, can you still have a way to live? After taking a look at the Emperor, the 3 ancestors directly fought with Lao Zun. The supreme ancestral power caused a vision of heaven and earth. A rare tide of energy swept the entire battlefield. There were weak monks and virtual men who died when their hearts broke. The 3 ancestors of the virtual universe were entangled by the old one, and the battlefield of the half-ancestors completely tilted towards the divine universe. Holding the Taro Excalibur on the left and the swordless pair of invisible longswords on the right, the damage caused is unimaginable. Only Jian Wushuang directly destroyed the army of vanguards who acted as pioneer scouts. A total of 200,000 vanguards and 50,000 vanities, none survived. Looking at the figure that turned the tide, Like the patron saint of divine power, the hearts of all monks were fiery. The belief, we can win as long as the sword is unparalleled, begins to be firm in the hearts of every monk. The giant phoenix covering the sky circled on his side, and the five-claw dragon emperor walked side by side with him. At this moment, the sword was blocked in front of all monks, like the true guardian deity. Until the emergence of Bahuang Shuzuan barely blocked the pace of Jian Wushuang. He has taken that step completely, and there is a faint breakthrough to the top of the barren emptiness, even with his two members of the Bite organization, at the same time besieging sword unparalleled. Jian Wushuang. All the shame you imposed on this seat today, this seat will be returned 10 times. The low and dark voice resounded from the mouth of 8 Desolation. The strong breath of the semi-ancestors peaked almost instantly. Jian Wushuang sneered, and the taro sword in his hand pointed directly at Bahuang. This time, what I want is not just your arm, but a complete head. Sword unparalleled. It. The 8 desolate angers, the humiliation of the past, and the new revenge directly led him to rush to the sword unparalleled. Standing in place, Jian Wushuang raised his lips slightly, and the blood wave supreme had released the bleeding shadow field behind him. You have a head on this item. Let's find out today. In the chaotic void, the blood shadow field violently trembled, and countless hands suddenly hooked, firmly holding the 8 desolate emperor. Chapter 46-37. The rushing 8 desolation emperor was directly caught in it, and the fierceness on his face had not even had time to retreat. A sharp edge, a sudden shock. Bahuang Shuzuan only felt that his neck was cold, and his eyes suddenly darkened. Just picking up the invisible sword on the right hand, the sharp and hardly noticeable sword intention swept out, and directly cut off the neck of Bahuang Shuzuan. The head fell so good that the sword Wushuang reached out and shook his hands away, which directly destroyed the head of Bahuang Shuzuan. And his headless corpse was devoured by the blood of the supreme blood shadow realm, and the gods were destroyed. All that happened was, in an instant, when the 2 members of the phagocytosis group reacted, the 8 desolate respects had perished. It's too fast. Just a blow that can't be seen clearly killed a semi-ancestor peak. This monster with only invincible supremacy, how can it be done? Both members of the phagocytosis group looked at Xiang Jian Wushuang in shock at the same time. Since you don't want to leave them all. The indifferent voice sounded like a life-saving note, resounding from Jian Wushuang's mouth. Returning from the shock, the 2 members of the phagocytosis looked at each other and shot 6 cards directly at the sword Wushu. Cards with a special metallic luster seem to have a strange magic power, and the space where they pass is swallowed and smooth. Jian Wu's eyes were frozen, and the pattern burst directly around his body, shattering the flying card. However, 2 cards escaped the explosion and covered the monk army. Nearly 20 invincible supremes and more than 500 top extremes, because they did not dodge, were instantly sealed in the card. After waiting for Jian Wushuang to block his hand, the 2 cards that directly sealed nearly 1,000 supreme masters automatically shattered, leaving no chance for rescue. That weird way of killing is really terrible. Even if the invincible supreme is a little careless, it will be sealed. Jian Wushuang was furious and angered, and directly used the ancestral power world gate, which was about to wipe out the swallowing organization. The magnificent sky gate emerges, and the giant sky finger comes. How can the 2 members of the ancestral organization, both of whom are semi-ancestors, not feel the ancestral breath of them and even prepare to escape? But soon they discovered that under the cover of that type of ancestral art, all retreats around them were blocked by the invisible enchantment. The great terror between life and death poured out from the bottom of his heart. No, you can't kill us, we will be even worse when we die. By then, Lord Devourer will make your magical universe pay your life. Jian Wushuang heard the words, his face did not fluctuate at all, the one-sided giant fingers still covered. The 2 members of the phagocytosis did not even send out a scream, and they both burst into a mist of blood. The slaying of the 3 ancestors in succession has temporarily relieved some pressure. However, the war between monks and virtual men is still not optimistic. The Xushi are just an accompanying false explosion, which has opened up the realm. Ordinary Supreme is almost a deadly situation against the previous one, which is equivalent to the Supreme explosion in order to exert its power, which almost directly affects the battle situation. The 2-for-1 and 1-for-1 situation make the divine universe look good, but the situation is not optimistic. Up to now, the casualties of monks in the divine universe have broken through millions. The army of the virtual universe, with the semi-ancestors such as Jian Wushuang, Fengqi, Lin Halongdi and other ancestors, has been swept away by siege, and the casualties are still far greater than the magical universe. Just Lao Zun alone is the 3 ancestors who dragged the virtual universe into a blunder, which is very important to the divine universe. If there is no old respect, even if there are dozens of ancestors in the divine universe, it will be almost impossible to escape. Jian Wushuang looked up at the back of Lao Zun gratefully, then completely let go of his hands and feet, killing the living force of the virtual universe. Above the void sky, the defeated terrorists showed the most primitive state, and the raging floated. There, even semi-ancestors dare not dare to get involved easily. Just the aftermath revealed by the 4 ancestors is enough to hang any semi-ancestors. The 3 ancestors encircled. Looking at this guy who couldn't tell whether he was young or old, he was completely shocked. The ancestral offensive that was usually enough to destroy everything, when it struck the Lao Zun, could hardly cause any harm. He seemed to be beyond the bounds of all rules, thus causing them to reduce their dimensionality. The arm of the rule behind Yen Yi has already been cut off 3. If it were not for the Emperor's care, Lao Zun could kill him almost every time he shot. What kind of existence is he in order to survive in the hands of the Emperor Devourer, who is equally powerful beyond his imagination? Is he, like the Emperor, also a master of the rules? The more I thought about it, the more I was shocked. With a little loss of mind, Lao Zun reached out and punched out a black light, which destroyed the big hole in the belly of Ai. Seeing that the Emperor, who had been walking around, raised his hand and sent him away from the circle. The situation around the 3-in-1 was instantly turned into the 2-in-1, and it had almost been defeated against the hypothesis of Lao Zun's most offensive. Emperor! Su Shen called out the name of Emperor Shin in a deep voice, suppressing dissatisfaction in her tone. The Emperor Eater didn't say much, and a huge chess game with a handful of palms in his hands appeared above the 3 men's heads. The strange energy transmitted in that game, even the old Supreme could not help but delay the offensive slightly. In the densely packed chess game, stars began to flow day by day, which seemed to have spawned countless celestial kingdoms. And in each side of the astral fuckingdom, there are countless energy surges, and the divine punishment that has turned the world into a lament. At the moment when the top chess game reduced the divine punishment, even if the top was like a false god, it barely emerged from it. The extermination fell off with punishment and bombardment, and burst completely with the old statue as the center. At this moment, the entire extraterrestrial battlefield has collapsed as a result. The darkest gale in the universe whistling out of the broken void. These terrible gale winds are for monks in the ultimate dominating realm, and starry sky in terms of soldiers, it is the deadliest. Wherever Feng Shui passed, ordinary monks and star-studded monks disappeared instantly and could not even make a sound. Jian Wushuang had anticipated that when he shouted loudly, "Defense!" all the monks in the extraterrestrial battlefields, no doubt there is him, directly converted the divine power into a guardian and fit together. Countless divine barriers rose up, a rare truce across the battlefield, and a weird death. Kill! Nearly 54 marked virtual princes violently rise, ready to surprise, and were killed by Sword Wushuang in one palm. His blood-filled eyes carried his mighty power, slowly sweeping through the restless army of virtual soldiers, and the vain priests being glanced back almost subconsciously. Chapter 46-38. At this moment, both monks and vain men reluctantly resisted in that terrible dark howling wind. Looking at the Emperor from the side, a complex of meaning that was difficult to understand emerged under the eyes of Shushan, and then it was depressed. The horrific punishment from the star chess game poured out on Lao Zun. These barriers, which were transformed from the black water, could no longer block the infinite power, and all the light and darkness in sight were swallowed up. Jian Wushuang trembled in his heart, directly urging his figure to prepare to support the old respect. Feng Qi grabbed it and said hurriedly, "You are dead. You can't change any results if you go there." Jian Wushuang knew the meaning of Feng Qi's words well, but his and his companions' deaths these days have gone far beyond ordinary feelings, even if they are prepared to give them whatever they want. Click dash. The crisp crackling sound suddenly resounded from the very center of the divine punishment, and then a huge arm like Xinghe broke the sky divine punishment and slammed into the emperor and the ethereal. The two eyes fixed, and each raised their hands to resist. Under the bombardment of this huge arm like Xinghe, even the ancestors retreated 1,000,000 miles away. The dark void was broken so that it could no longer be broken, and the escaped dark matter filled every inch of space. While far away, the injured Yanzi recovered and hurried to rush to the emperor. That blow slowly retracted the arms of the two giant ancestors who had retreated from the ancestors, and at the same time, held the big palm away and shattered the star-falling chessboard directly. Lao Zun's figure was proud and independent, and the majestic black water treasure behind him slowly opened his eyes. The eyes are like two long rivers of black water that run through the ages. The vast and barren atmosphere makes everyone feel their own smallness, just like a drop in Taika. At this moment, even the mysterious and calmly eaten emperor cannot calm down. The virtual was terrified and immediately released his ancestor. I saw a demon who awakened from the unknown wilderness, sitting in the dark, and his eyes were as big as a star field. At the same time, on the body of this demon, 6 ancient chains engraved with scarlet runes were bound, and they were extremely embarrassing. This demon who seems to be bound by the rules of heaven is the ancestor of the virtual god. The extreme evil black flame came out of the devil's mouth full of fangs, and slammed into the black water river. At the same time, the Emperor Eater also shot, and a black gold crown was thrown from his sleeve by him and smashed straight. Biting his teeth, Yen Yi also rose, and the only 3 regular arms behind him turned into spears. The combined strike of the 3 ancestors, this extraterritorial battlefield was originally the weakest and most chaotic place in the universe, and could not bear it at all. The space outside the battlefield began to shatter toward the cave. 3 ancestral offensives, with supreme power, finally prevented Lao Zun's endless blow. The shock wave turned into ripples, shaking for 9 days and 10 places. He took a few steps back, opened his mouth and spit out a blood of God, and the arms of the rules behind him were all broken. The ancestors of the deities behind the virtual gods also cracked. The Emperor Eater raised his hand to take back the black gold crown. His face was finally dignified. Obviously, the power of Lao Zun is beyond their expectations. For a time, the 3 ancestors dare not act rashly. Lao Zun, as before, seems to have not been damaged from beginning to end. The sword Wushuang lowered his mouth slightly, and the Taro sword in his hand held up, "Battle!" The glorious divine power emerged from the sky, and the sword unparalleled was transformed into kendo, and the battlefield was vertical and horizontal. The army of more than 3 million monks rushed to the army of Su Shi again. If it weren't for an extraterrestrial battlefield, I'm afraid no starfield could support such a terrible war. In the previous battle, the 2 ancestors who were almost killed by Jian Wushuang now faced Jian Wushuang with full of hatred. The Tai Luo divine sword was cut out, but Jian Mang was absorbed strangely. At the same time, the 2-in-1 strange half-ancestor shook his arms in the air, and an invisible enclave directly covered the sword Wushuang in it. "This time I want your life." He was completely insane, his mouth screaming constantly. The sword Wushuang was not afraid, and the Tai Luo divine sword released the scorching Shin Meng. "Courageous enough, you can take it." With the interweaving of divine power and imaginary power, a broken corpse paves in the void. Above the broken sky, the weakest one in the ancestral ranks has already been completed in this terrible confrontation. The wound that was about to heal in his abdomen was faintly torn. Su Shen felt that the ancestor of the devil behind him had broken to a certain extent and finally stopped. "You don't belong to the divine universe," Su Shen said, looking at the old statue standing in front of him. Lao Zun whispered, "So what?" Taking a deep breath, the virtual said again, "Since you do not belong to the magical universe, then join my virtual universe. I can agree to you first if you want." "Really?" Lao Zun leaned forward slightly and opened his eyes. "Everything can be promised?" Su Shen nodded, "All conditions." "So, I think you're all dead?" Lao Zun opened his eyes suddenly, and the indescribable energy spewed out of his palm turned into thousands of black and black exercises, bound away. "You're looking for death." The false anger drank, and the ancestral demon ancestor behind him suddenly broke the chain bound to his left arm and smashed directly into the old respect. Emperor and Emperor looked at each other, and together urged the figure to face the old statue. The giant arm of the demon ancestor smashed nearly 100 dark horses, and at the same time pressed the old with the virtual god. However, the transfiguration of the dark and black horses was like a living creature, which was smashed and emerged continuously. The ancestral deities of Tong Tian demon roared, but fell into siege within a short period of time. Lao Zun waved his arms, little by little trapping the false gods. He felt that a strange amount of energy was quickly eating away at his own power. Can't help but be frightened. As he was about to explode the ancestors of the demon god, the virtual suddenly felt a chill behind him, and he looked back subconsciously. I saw that he had already leaped high and issued the most terrifying force in his hand. He did not go towards the old respect, but turned towards his back. The quake in Zuxin's heart suddenly reappeared, the cold and majestic expression. He did his best, and the giant demon ancestor behind him finally broke free of thousands of black horses, and then Tongshen's arm directly grasped the smashing shot. He was about to make a deadly blow to Su Sun, but he was controlled by Su Sun's demon ancestor. He didn't respond at all, and was thrown to Lao Zun directly. "Do not." Holding one's neck with one hand, Lao Zun smiled slightly. His black pupils seemed to have an irresistible power and began to eat away at one's mind. Chapter 4639. Bloody battle. The void collapsed and the terrifying blow went straight to Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang did not dodge. Instead, he faced the terrifying attack of Void God with one hand. The golden-red divine power and the dark-black void power collided. Everyone felt the space under their feet shake as they all looked forward. The result that they had imagined did not happen. Jian Wushuang was as stable as a destabilizing divine needle, and the monstrous void power was destroyed by him directly. All the cultivators were in an uproar. Feng Qi and the other ancestors were even more shocked. In the past, Jian Wushuang could only barely resist Void God's attack. Now, he was even more terrifying. His growth made the three ancestor realm powerhouses wary. This child cannot be left alive. The army that was filled with void energy had finished gathering, and a sad song was about to be heard in the off-world battlefield. As Jian Wushuang raised the Tarot Divine Sword high, the cultivators behind him took the lead to attack. The endless divine power turned into an arrow that could not be turned back and ruthlessly nailed into the camp of the army of void warriors. This was a bloody battle between the peak of divine power and void power. A total of 7 ancestors released their respective domains immediately. Feng Qi turned into a giant phoenix that covered the sky. She let out a clear cry and led the tens of thousands of phoenix clansmen to charge forward. The fiercest and most soul-devouring nirvana fire domain in the world spread out in the army of void warriors. Anyone who was infected by the flames, even a 6-scar void master, would be destroyed. Dragon Emperor Linhe conjured his natal dragon once again. Every time his body flipped, it was enough to tear the sky apart and destroy the world. The dragon claw, which was like a giant pillar supporting the sky, descended, turning hundreds of scar-level void masters into clouds of blood mist. Supreme Shuebo raised his arm and advanced. Countless blood shadows filled the void like a swamp, and any void master who entered this blood shadow domain would be weakened without them knowing it. Supreme Tian Yi, Supreme Jun Fu, White Ape Overlord Patriarch, Great Void Divine Emperor, and Golden Crow Emperor, all of them were supreme experts who had dominated the world for millions of chaos cycles. They led their armies and followed the path of blood that had been opened up by ancestors, resolutely charging into the army of void warriors. This was the most brutal battle to the death. There was no other way except for the death of one side. Jian Wushuang was at the forefront of the army of cultivators. His body was surging with brilliant divine patterns, and his huge treasure image was protecting the cultivators below him. An invisible sword appeared in his right palm. Wushuang Sword Dao, Star River Lake Sea Sword Intent rose from the sky. The vast stars and the Star River bloomed in the star-style sword intent. This sword strike had broken the past and the present, and it had gathered too much of his willfulness and dejection. It was an extremely proud move, and it was Jian Wushuang's Sword Dao. Even Ancestor Realm experts have to lower their heads when they see it. The indescribable swordsmanship suppressed the void. Wherever the sword pointed, hundreds of millions of miles was his territory. This move turned 100,000 void warriors into ashes. A path that was soaked in blood and covered with corpses was cut out. Devour One, who wanted to stop Jian Wushuang, did not move. The black water phantom floated in front of the three Ancestor Realm experts. Attack me together then. Old Master looked at them indifferently, his words concise. Void God's face darkened. You're looking for death. With that, extreme Ancestor Realm power surged, and countless mysterious and dark runes emerged from Void God's body. At the same time, two chains engraved with flowing light runes smashed out from Void God's back and smashed toward Old Master with the power to shatter the void. At the same time, Devour One also moved. The 6 arms of laws of various colors behind him transformed into illusionary light and pressed down on Old Master. Devouring Emperor, who was wearing his crown and had been calm all this time, made his move at the same time. A black beam of light suddenly shot out from his black and gold robe. 3 Ancestor Realm attacks suppressed Old Master at the same time. The void was shattered by this attack, and the ripples of destruction caused the void of the star field to collapse. In the face of this destructive attack, Old Master's eyes turned from indifferent to serious. The black scepter in his hand transformed into a rippling barrier, which he used to block the attack. The 3 destructive attacks were like clay oxen entering the sea, completely dissipating. Old Master lifted his hand to remove the barrier, and his pitch-black eyes locked on Devour One. Persimmons should be picked and pinched, and people should be picked and beaten. Due to the restraints of the rules of the Great Tao, Old Master had to break through the blockade as soon as possible under the limits of his body. Devour One, who had just reached Ancestor Realm, was the best choice. Seeing Old Master's intense stare, the past came back to his mind again, and even the newly grown arm of laws behind him started to ache. A trace of fear flickered in the depths of Devour One's eyes, but it was more of madness. Even if I can't defeat you by myself, there are 3 of us now. Do you think you can still survive? After exchanging a glance with Devouring Emperor, the 3 of them engaged in close combat with Old Master. The Ancestor-level aura caused a phenomenon in the heavens and earth. A rare energy tide swept across the entire battlefield. Some cultivators and void warriors with slightly weaker cultivation realms died immediately with their hearts shattered. The 3 Ancestor Realm powerhouses of the Void Universe were entangled by Old Master, and the battle of the Ancestor-level powerhouses was completely tilted toward the Divine Power Universe. With the Tarot Divine Sword in his left hand and the Invisible Long Sword in his right hand, Jian Wushuang's destructive power was beyond imagination. Jian Wushuang alone had annihilated the army of Void Warriors who had served as the Vanguard Scouts. There were 200,000 Void Warriors and 50,000 Void Masters, but none of them survived. Looking at the figure who had turned the tide like the guardian of the universe, all the cultivators' hearts were burning. As long as Jian Wushuang is alive, we will win. This belief began to strengthen in the hearts of every cultivator. The sky-covering giant phoenix circled around him, and the 5-clawed dragon emperor walked side by side with him. At this moment, Jian Wushuang stood in front of all the cultivators like a real guardian god. It was not until the appearance of the Ba Huang that Jian Wushuang was barely stopped. Void Master Ba Huang, who had taken the last step and was on the verge of breaking through to the peak, surrounded Jian Wushuang with the two members of Devourers. Jian Wushuang, all the humiliation you've imposed on me, I will return it 10 times today. A deep and sinister voice came out of the mouth of the Void Master Ba Huang. The powerful aura of a half-ancestor surged almost instantly. Jian Wushuang sneered and pointed the Tarot Divine Sword at the Ba Huang. This time, I'm not only going to take your arm, but your whole head. Jian Wushuang, you deserve to die. Void Master Ba Huang was furious. The humiliation of the past and the new hatred made him charge at Jian Wushuang without any hesitation. Jian Wushuang, who was standing still, smirked. Behind him, Supreme Shuebo had already released the Blood Shadow Domain. I'll end your life today. In the chaotic void, the Blood Shadow Domain shook violently and countless bloody hands grabbed Void Master Ba Huang. Chapter 4640. The sorrow of the world and the terrible detonation directly destroyed the extraterrestrial battlefield, and everything was destroyed in the fragmentation. The entire emptiness of the sky was swallowed up by the polar daylight produced by that explosion. Even the Emperor Eater was a subconscious cover. This indescribable polar day lasted for nearly half a cup of tea. Waiting for the dazzling polar day to dissipate, the Emperor Eater hurriedly glanced up at the center of the explosion, but apart from nothingness, there was only a little bit of wreckage and broken arm. Where are the two of them? Asked the Emperor Shen Sheng, and the endless majesty pressed against the of emptiness. Su Shen showed no weakness, and he was in a state of extreme power. Do you think that you can't kill him by me alone? Forbearing in his heart cut off the fierce rage of the virtual god, the Emperor urged his body to eagerly investigate in the explosive center. Impossible, did he really die? The Emperor was horrified, but the blow from Su Shen was too horrible, and Lao Zun was seriously injured by his attack, and it was difficult to survive that blow. Thinking of this, the Emperor suppressed the anger and suspicion in his heart. He did not look at the virtual god, and cast his eyes downward. There is an army of nearly 3 million magical universes. I don't care if he dies or not, it's right now you ants. The Emperor is like a real decision-maker, and directly issues orders over the of falsehood, slapping as many as possible, leaving no one. The Su Shi army hesitated for a moment, and then, led by several members of the ancestral organization, rushed to the army of madness. Taking a deep breath, Shen Shushen said, Emperor, you have crossed the border. The Emperor heard the words and sneered, it's just a cosmic order, so you take it to heart? Don't you forget that your own promise was the original. There was a hint of hatred in the bottom of the eyes, and the virtual never spoke again, manipulating the ancestor of the demon behind, and smashing the power of the divine power. Jian Wushuang and the only ancestor of the divine power universe fell. All the monks of the divine power universe looked at that scene. Without the sword Wushuang who entered the kendo with one's body, and the army of soldiers with a virtual army like a no man's land, all the monks almost lost their benchmarks and hopes almost instantly. The horrific blow of the demon ancestors directly wiped out more than 200,000 monks, and the supreme divine realm died out countless. The Jinwu tribe, Taishu Temple, all the disciples of Jade Pavilion who came to help, all died. None survive. When the purple hair was supreme and the red ear supreme was about to die, he looked away at the place where Jianwu twinned. With a smile in his eyes, he quietly went to death after a quiet cherishment. The foundation of the Star Sword sect was destroyed, leaving only Wu Jianxian and a few others to barely escape the disaster. The 3 phoenixes and unicorns were also seriously injured. After the Emperor Eater also joined the battlefield of the slaughter, the forces of the divine universe have already suffered the devastation. Even the semi-ancestors have no resistance at this moment. Cold and frosty, his face looked at the destruction that was approaching. A dash, the huge wings that covered the sky quietly blocked in front of the cold frost, while blocking the aftermath of the ancestor. Feng Qi uttered a terrible cry, and his phoenix was extinguished and turned into a human figure and fell down. Lung Rushuang hurriedly reached out and hugged, and Feng Qi, who fell into his arms, was already shattered with blood on his left side. Old ancestors. A total of more than 200 are the supreme ancestors of the Feng clan. An army of more than 3 million monks, only 1 million remain. The virtual universe is completely insane, and every virtual person is like a bloodthirsty demon, quickly eating away the life of the divine universe. Looking at the battle that was almost a foregone conclusion, Bloodwave Supreme seemed 10 years old at the same time. The hardest thing to say was finally spoken. Everyone who belongs to the divine universe retreats as much as possible and retains the final salary. The face of every monk is extremely pale. With this defeat, the magical universe will no longer exist, and no one can stop the pace of the virtual universe. Here, leave it to the old man to take care of him. The Bloodwave Supreme robe hunted against the wind. His face was not half frightened, only indifferent after seeing through the fortune. A broken snowflake sword was already broken. Lao Kier pours the last sip of wine from his wine gourd into his throat, and then enters the half-ancestor state. He was silent for a whole life, and he wandered all his life. In the last battle, he finally realized. The splendid and magnificent half-ancestor divine power emerged, and the old beggar dressed up as a martyr in Bali disappeared and replaced by a young swordsman with a sword and eyebrows. The divine power universe can't be led by no one, and let you do that kind of thing. The old swordsman, a young swordsman, laughed loudly. It's time to find a place to rest after living so long. A blood-stained Linha Dragon Emperor also took a step forward and said quietly, "Here is the place for us. I would like to ask the blood wavelength to take good care of the magical universe." Long Yen, Longqi held the blood wave supreme. "Let's go." The supreme power dropped, the old beggar laughed loudly, and a turbulent blue-shirt swordsman transformed himself into a sword, like a long river, against the sky. The old beggar shouted with his own body, and finally defeated the virtual god. The sword dissipated like a star, and the divine universe also lost a semi-ancestor. Under the strike of Lao Kier, all the vanity that crossed the sword waterfall died out. Even the semi-ancestors were evading the frontier and gaining time for the retreat of the divine force. At this moment, on the broken extraterrestrial battlefield, only the Dragon Emperor Linha remained, standing firmly in the distance. Looking at this monk who is not yet at the peak of his ancestors, the emperor didn't want to, and reached out to kill. However, the falling slap of the sky is hard to reach half an inch in the next moment. As the emperor's eyes narrowed, a breath of great terror came from his face. A sturdy bone dragon claw suddenly grasped the emperor's palmar slap and then smashed it directly. Disillusionment started. The day-like eyes burst out with magnificent light. The Emperor Linha looked calm, and his clear eyes gradually became cloudy. Incarnate red Jinzalong, 1 gold, 1 bone and 2 dragons, turned into the last line of defense and stayed here. The ancestors of the first generation of the dragon family and the Dragon Emperor both fell off the outer battlefield. The Emperor dies, the virtual is wounded, and the virtual universe army is erased by nearly 800,000. The boundless corpse is filled with nothingness and void, with countless blood, magic fragments gathered into a winding river. This battle of catastrophe is far from stopped. No one knows when it will end, but it will end with the complete destruction of one universe. Chapter 46-41. Among the broken robes, the jadeite jade ornaments were ringing, and a slender green lotus whose rhizomes were jasperized, slowly falling into the endless abyss with its owner. Every drop of God's blood with powerful power falls into the void, like leaves returning to the earth. Everything seems to be a strange dream, falling forever. However, in this dark matter full of unknowns, as in the darkness of dreams, a pure and extreme Jin Mang broke this chaos. Here, how can there be two people? A puzzled and magnificent voice sounded, and finally everything was calm again. I don't know how long, the figure that should have fallen under the hands of Shushan, but I don't know how to survive, slowly opened his eyes. Into the eyes, I just feel the surroundings are clear, and there is a gentle sound of breeze and bamboo in my ears. Isn't I dead? Here is reincarnation. Did God die? Would there be reincarnation? Sitting slowly from the bamboo bed, Jian Wushuang was too late to think about any problems, and was interrupted by the severe pain from his body. I still have pain when I die? Am I not dead? Jian Wushuang murmured softly, hurriedly holding his heart, carefully examining the meridians in his body. After this investigation, he really realized that he was not dead. Except that the meridians in the body are broken, even the divine power is slowly circulating in life and death. I didn't die? I didn't die. Unable to control the ecstasy, Jian Wushuang forgot the severe pain in his body. Only after calming down for a while, he looked at the temporary room. The room is so simple that every piece of furniture and window decoration, even the house is made of bamboo, and from a rough level, it seems that the owner made it by hand. Fighting the pain, Jian Wushuang walked out of the room barefoot. Outside the door, the warm and gentle sunlight was shining on the face, and bamboo gardens were planted on both sides of the small house. In front of him, there is a vast plain. Looking at the environment like a fairyland in front of him, Jian Wushuang completely let go of his vigilance. He hasn't known how many years, and he has never enjoyed a moment of relaxation. But he only relaxed for a moment, and all the problems came to mind again. The fierce battlefield of blood and fire, the army of 1 million magical monks, and the severely wounded Lao Zun are now like a sharp knife on his body. Taking a deep breath, Jian Wushuang looked at another room in the bamboo house behind him. He quickly pushed in the door, and he was slightly relieved. In the room, Lao Zun was lying quietly on it, his breath was gentle, and he had passed the dangerous period, but only the dark blue cobweb-like lines on his skin had not disappeared. Without any hesitation, Jian Wushuang sat in front of the bed and reached out to cross the Buddhist power of circulation and death into Lao Zun. Divine power enters the body like a mud ox into the sea, but no trace is seen, but the sword is as if sitting still, just as it has always been to enter the divine power. So many years back and forth, the round of the sky will never rise and fall, everything is as usual. Until this continent sent out a slight wave. Opening his eyes slowly, as if aware of something, Jian Wushuang quickly walked out of the bamboo house. From the distant sky, a gap was automatically opened in space, and countless figures came to this continent. Looking at the familiar figures and the familiar divine power, Jian Wushuang couldn't restrain his heart and swept away. The body of the bloodbath is supreme. Both the deities and consciousness have reached the end of the crossbow. On his side, the white shirt turned into the blood shirt of the 9 kings of calamity, the ancestor white ape, dragon pheasant, dragon pond, Wu Jianxian 2 virtual emperor and others did the same. The army of monks less than a few million has long lost any glory in their eyes, but only the Kirin family, who also suffered heavy casualties, has a look of excitement on their faces. Sword unparalleled in a plain shirt, but came to everyone in an instant. Bloodwave Supreme smiled slowly and said slowly, Wushuang Gongzhu, Bloodwave has come to see you. At the end of the speech, the Supreme Bloodwave passed out. Jian Wushuang hurriedly urged his figure to hold the Bloodwave supremely. Wu Jianxian, on the other hand, opened her eyes wide and couldn't settle the channel. Swords warriors? Are you dead? Jian Wushuang nodded with a bitter smile. Fortunately, I didn't die. Let's not talk about this first, you'll find a place quickly. At this moment, all the nerves that had been strained were completely relaxed. He was not dead, and everyone firmly believed that the divine universe had a chance. Nearly 1 million magical forces of the universe are stationed directly on the plane. After all, every inch of space here is full of pure divine power. It is imperative to quickly restore itself. Until the overwhelmed monks were properly arranged, Jian Wushuang noticed that not far away, a middle-aged man in a suit of Su Jinhua was looking at him with a smile. Behind that extraordinary middle-aged man, only the 2 surviving members of the Kirin 5 sons, Kairing and Qi, stood there. With almost intuition, Jian Wushuang realized that the middle-aged man was the master of this world. Little friend, she is extraordinary in physique, and has been fully recovered in just a few years. The middle-aged man took Qi Tinky and the two together and quickly stepped in front of Jian Wushuang. Thank you for saving your life, Jian Mo is grateful. Jian Wushuang arched solemnly. The middle-aged man laughed loudly. My name is Qi Ting, the eldest son of the Kirin tribe. If you don't hate it, you can call me Brother Qi. Looking at the two men behind the middle-aged man, Qi Tinky already understood that the middle-aged man was right. Without much hesitation, Jian Wushuang smiled again. Big Brother Qi. The middle-aged man named Qi Ting nodded and smiled. For many years, my situation in Kangwatai has finally been of some use. Kangwatai, where is this? Near the broken Luodu. It lives in the eyes of Chaos Spring, explained Qi Ting. Jian Wushuang nodded. When Luodu's starfield was destroyed, he felt vaguely that there was strange energy attached to the eyes of Chaos Spring. Now he wants to come to this state of Kangwatai. I have been here since my youth. To this day, I haven't known how many epochs, and everything that has happened outside has not been known for half a minute. It has been half a lifetime. Qi Ting is half reminiscent and half emotional. If I didn't take that step completely, I'm afraid that this tribulation of the divine universe will be my eternal regret. Speaking of which, Qi Ting's eyes flashed with burning stalks, a kind of breath that emerged through the vicissitudes of ancient times. And Jian Wushuang, who just wanted to comfort Qi Ting a few words, couldn't help but feel shocked when he felt everything that appeared to him. The kind of person who is completely aloof from the outside, but has control over all things, breathes and swallows the existence of the creation of rules, it is an ancestor. Chapter 46-42. See Ancestor again. The kind that almost represents the entire universe and the embodiment of the entire universe. There should be only, and there can only be two. But now there have been 5 statues. The virtual universe has a total of virtual gods, by the Emperor, and 1 or 3 deities. The divine power cosmic is 1. At present, in the Kangwu platform near the eye of this chaotic spring, the Kirin tribe actually has 1. Jian Wushuang felt that his thoughts were a bit chaotic. When he first sat in Yunshao Palace, he had heard that the of the universe talked about the luck of the universe and the extreme state. In a word, whether it is the divine universe or the void universe, only 2 ancestors can be born. Because in the vast sky, although the divine power is magnificent, but the luck is only 10% of nothingness. The most important step for children to achieve the ancestor level is to grasp the 10% that is scattered throughout the universe. The original of the sky and the ancestor of Feng Tian are a good example. The god of the earth first realized that the fortune in the universe would cause Feng Tian's ancestors to fail to break through the ancestor level until the moment he died. And why the poor universe can only have 1 ancestor, because no matter who it is, from the moment the ancestor is achieved, he is the master of order and guardian of the rules of the universe. Ancestors are, in a way, equivalent to the concrete representation of the universe. Unless the previous ancestor falls, there is no possibility of a second ancestor below this avenue. The top of the universe is the ancestral level. This was previously believed by Jian Wushuang, because the rules and divine power controlled by the of the universe are too vast. He can no longer imagine what kind of power can be surpassed. But after experiencing all the catastrophes, he completely changed Jian Wushuang's thinking. The appearance of Lao Zun and Emperor is obviously beyond the ancestor. Even the true ancestor of the virtual cannot cause damage to Lao Zun. They seemed to come with the mist, and everything was pushing the sword Wushuang in the hazy unknown. Taking a deep breath, Jian Wushuang quickly accepted this reality, and at the same time he was a little happy. The Kirin tribe now has an ancestor, which is unimaginable for the role of the 2-party universe war. Looking at the sword Wushuang who just came back from his thoughts, Qi Ting laughed again. The lord of the Wushuang palace is a real astounding Tianjiao. From your roots, I have not even reached 100 years. Jian Wushuang did not conceal this, and shook his head with a smile. Big Brother Qi is ridiculous. Jian has less than 900,000 years. As soon as this remark was made, both Cheating and Chi-Chi took a breath of cold air. From the previous tragic battles, it seems that the sword Unparalleled is the first person below the ancestor level, and the magical power has killed half of the ancestor level. So far everyone has a deep memory. They thought that Jian Wushuang was an old monster who had practiced countless chaos ages with Zeus, but never thought that he had only practiced for 900,000 years? What kind of genius is that to reach such a point? It is necessary to know that even if they are the most common descendants of the Kirin tribe, it takes 10 million years to sleep once. You can grow to such a degree less than 1/10 of your sleep time. Qi Ting only thinks that he has practiced the dog for so many years, and he has practiced it on dogs. After hearing the affirmation of Jian Wushuang, even Qi Ting, who has been promoted to the rank of ancestor, shook his head and smiled bitterly. It turns out that in this world, there is really no arrogance. Next, under the inquiry of Qi Ting, Jian Wushuang elaborated all the major events that have happened in the universe over the past hundreds of thousands of years before saying goodbye. He was eager to know the current status of the divine universe. Flying to the previous bamboo house, the Bloodwave Supreme who had fainted to death was awake. The White Ape, Dragon Owl, Dragon Pond, Wu Jianxian, etc. all sat in place and recovered their injuries as soon as possible. After seeing Jian Wushuang, Bloodwave Supreme got up quickly, but was pressed on the bamboo bed by Jian Wushuang. Master of Wushuang Palace, we all thought you were dead, and seeing you again today is really God's immortal universe. Bloodwave Supreme eyes reddish. Jian Wushuang was also extremely emotional in his heart. At the same time, he was also a bit puzzled. From the perspective of his deities and power consumption at that time, he could not compete with the full blow of the virtual god. Lao Zun was also seriously injured by a sneak attack at the time, and was also unable to compete. Facing the attack of Supreme Terror, there is absolutely only the end of the annihilation, but Jian Wushuang at this moment prefers to be good, and even after waking up, he has never detected a dark illness in his body. After a brief thought, Jian Wushuang left it behind. Immediately afterwards, he began to inquire about what happened during the period when he and Lao Zun were dead. Everyone calmly or sadly died. The scenes of the past emerged from the past, one by one, the supreme arrogance of each era, and now they are all turned into dead bones and lying on the desolate battlefield outside the battle. The repressed swords are breathless. Get angry. Everything that shouldn't have happened, the old friend who shouldn't have died, really went away. How to end the reappearance of this scene? Jian Wushuang already has the answer in his heart. And when I heard it was the remnant of the entire divine universe that Qi Ting had taken in after the battle of the Holocaust, Jian Wushuang also vaguely knew that when he and Lao Zun floated somewhere in the universe, they should also be led by Qi Ting. After listening to all of this, Jian Wushuang said in a deep voice, "When our wound is healed, it is the day to swing the sword again." Bloodwave Supreme never refuted the words of Jian Wushuang, and he nodded firmly. After another charge, Jian Wushuang walked to another bamboo house. Lung Wushuang had been waiting outside the door, her eyes closed for years, making her extremely stunned. Jian Wushuang was so distressed that he reached into her arms. "Fujuan is all useless to me, so Feng Qi paid such a great price to save me." Lung Wushuang whispered in a low voice. "Stupid girl, this is not to blame you, it is Feng's ancestors' righteousness that they will willingly give up to save you." Jian Wushuang waved the tears in her eyes and said quietly, "Relax, I will definitely help Fengqi Patriarch is out of danger." After handing Lung Wushuang to take care of the girl Lan Lan, Jian Wushuang quickly walked into the enchantment set by the descendants of the Phoenix clan. As soon as I set foot, the hot and blazing fire rose with the wind, and even the divine power in Jian Wushuang had a burning sensation. At this moment, only about 2,000 children and grandchildren are sitting on the ground. At the very least, they are sketched by ordinary divine powers, transforming into a huge wingspan, which together depicts a nirvana formation. At the center of these eyes, Feng Qi's thin figure was lying flat. Chapter 46-43. At a glance, Jian Wushuang realized that Feng Qi's situation is far more serious than he thought. The broken soul is like a cloud of smoke, and the unstoppable escape is no longer possible. If it is not a Feng clan belonging to one of the three ancient tribes, I am afraid that the virtual god's blow will be enough to kill Feng Qi. Perhaps he was aware of the entry of external force, and a handsome young man with a naked upper body stood up and was about to anger. When he saw that it was Jian Wushuang, the anger in his eyes turned to loneliness and sadness. What's the situation? Do I need to do anything? Jian Wushuang quickly stepped forward and asked. The handsome young man stopped talking, and finally said, I'm afraid it's hard for the ancestor to get through this time. Jian Wushuang heard the words, and his heart sank suddenly. Isn't it possible that you all can be reborn in nirvana? I have also seen Feng Qi show it, and soon recovered from the near-death state. Yes, our Feng family can indeed nirvana, but the ancestor of the ancestor has gone. We can't even awaken the ancestor. How can she carry out nirvana? Jun Mei Youth looked sad. Even if it is the descendants of my family, you can't wake up with the same force. Looking at the spirit that could not be suppressed even in the nirvana formation, I was afraid that Feng Qi would be truly dead if he let it go on. Without thinking, Jian Wushuang directly said, Can I get into the formation? I want to give it a try. There was a moment of hesitation flashing in the eyes of the handsome young man, but before he could speak, Jian Wushuang stepped directly into the formation. There was an urgent voice behind him, Be sure to seize the time, I am afraid that the ancestor may fall at any time. Taking a deep breath, Jian Wushuang came to the very center of the formation, watching his eyes closed like a sleeping Feng Qi, and he slowly sat in front of her. I'm coming. The fiery little flames flew away with the wind. Jian Wushuang is like talking to the heart, telling Feng Qi about the past, from the first meeting to the side-by-side battle. He is like a family treasure, portrayed exactly. I am very grateful for everything you did. You saved my life when you were in Luodu, and you saved my wife's life on the battlefield outside the territory without turning back. If I CNT wake up, I'm afraid I CNT get enough of it. When you wake up, I will promise you, or the 3 promises of the Feng family, no matter where I am in the future, and when these 3 promises will be valid forever. In addition, I think that in the coming years, the divine power universe will not have a woman like you, which will be too boring. The calm words accompanied by the hair-like flames escaped in this burst. And the handsome young man who was like an ant on the hot pot outside the formation, also stopped now, and fixed his eyes on the center of the formation. The spirit of Feng Qi, which had been escaping continuously, began to no longer escape outward, and at the same time those scattered spirits began to transform into the appearance of little fire phoenix and quickly withdrew into the body. Seeing this scene, Jian Wushuang was overjoyed in his heart and directly opened his left wrist. The blood of the ultra-perfect spiritual constitution immediately fell on Feng Qi's left body. The blood of God, which contains strong and tenacious vitality, like vines, quickly repairs and nourishes Feng Qi's broken body. The skin fills up at a rate visible to the naked eye, and every meridian is repairing. And Feng Qi's pale face also became at a rate visible to the naked eye. I don't know how long after that, Feng Qi opened his eyes slowly, watching the sword blood that moisturizes the blood of her sword, and she said quietly, I heard what you just said. There were already some dizzy swordsmen, and he grinned reluctantly. It's good to hear it. If you can't hear me, just say nothing. Are you serious about what you said? Feng Qi continued to ask. Jian Wushuang nodded, naturally. A happy look appeared on Feng Qi's face, and he didn't see Jian Wushuang's increasingly pale face at all. You don't owe me anything. I save you. That's my willingness. During the bleeding for nearly half of the incense stick time, even Jian Wushuang could hardly hold it. Come on, Nirvana, I can't hold on. Feng Qi reacted, and hurriedly propped up, covering the wound between Jian Wu's hands and wrists with his hands. You are such a nerd. Are you afraid of damaging the source by so much blood flowing from the source? Jian Wushuang shook his head slowly. Leave me alone. Your business matters, don't delay. Then you are waiting for me here, don't leave anyway. Feng Qi bit her lip lightly. If you go, I won't do it. Jian Wushuang only felt dizzy and could not care about anything, so he nodded again and again. Feng Qi smiled and turned to walk behind him. In front of her, one side braved the fierce, terrifying flames to completely open. A pair of flame wings suddenly burst out behind Feng Qi, and then entered the enchanted fire. With her front foot off the ground, Jian Wushuang collapsed into the center of her eyes. Due to the order of the ancestors, the descendants of the Feng clan did not dare to step into the formation easily and could only control the fire by scratching their ears and scratching their heads, so as to make the sword Wushuang in the eyes as comfortable as possible. Time passed by, and 2 days later, in the enchantment of the fire area that had been calm, violently swept away thousands of fire feathers. At the same time, with a huge fiery red wings, Junmei Yinghui's abnormal women swooped out of it. After Nirvana's success, Feng Qi ran directly to the drowsy sword in front of his eyes. She lifted her hand and also cut her wrist, dripping into the mouth of Jian Wushuang with the blood of her ancestral blood. The handsome young man standing on the outermost periphery saw this and hurriedly said, "Never mind the ancestor." Feng Qi was ignorant, and the blood of the ancestral blood of the Feng clan still dripped into his mouth evenly. Absorb it, be sure to absorb more. The blood of the ancestor of the Phoenix family entered the throat, and all the meridians in Jian Wushuang's body burned at the same time. At the same time, a winged phoenix shadow appeared in the center of his chest, just like living creatures. Feng Qi, after pondering over and over again, stretched out his right hand and painted it quickly on Jian Wushuang's left arm. Immediately, a simple phoenix totem emerged, then hidden under the skin. After all this, Feng Qi smirked like a childish child, and then returned to the usual lonely cold look. After the blood of the Feng ancestors in Jian Wushuang reached saturation, Feng Qi withdrew his palm. All states are calming down, and Jian Wushuang falls into a deep sleep. Feng Qi walked out of the formation slowly and said softly, "You are here to take good care of Wushuang Palace Master and notify me as soon as you wake up." The handsome young man nodded his promise, and then continued to carefully urge the formation. Chapter 46-44. With the passing of time, Kangwu Taichung will never have day and night, and the ultimate divine power makes this the most perfect place to sit and realize. As the dojo of Kiting's ancestors, the avenue rules contained here are far beyond any place in the divine universe. This Kangwutai is equivalent to the Yunshao Palace at the time of the Eternal God. And in the palace of Eternal God Yunshao, I heard that it is an unforgettable great blessing. Often, only the most shocking and brilliant genius in the universe has such a chance to hear the futon. This Kangwu Terrace, which is also an ancestor-level dojo, opened new doors and allowed these million monks to practice Taoism. In just a few months, all the monks of the divine universe have recovered from the trauma, but there are still tens of thousands of traumatized monks who died. At the same time, many monks broke through the shackles of the cloud mud and went straight into the supreme divine realm. And Jian Wushuang also woke up soon after, thinking that the original divine power that would be slightly lost not only did not wear at all, but was accompanied by a strange surging power. Jian Wushuang didn't understand it until the descendants of the Feng clan said vaguely that the endless breath of life in the meridian was originally the cause of the blood of the ancestral veins delivered by Feng Qi. Shaking his head helplessly, Jian Wushuang was about to leave this circle, and Feng Qi, who was wearing a red flowing cloud and a shirt, appeared in front of him. Feng Qi's eyes lit up suddenly, and hurried up to investigate with his palm. Jian Wushuang was embarrassed and quickly protected the bare chest. How is it possible? Obviously should be able to break through that kind of state. Feng Qi frowned slightly. After tidying up his clothes, Jian Wushuang said, "What are you talking about, mysterious?" Feng Qi didn't hide it and said straightforwardly, "When you sent me blood before, I vaguely felt that your breath has reached the threshold of breakthrough, but now why are there no signs of breakthrough? Do you think the half-ancestor level is so good to break through, which half-ancestor level is not immersed in the invincible realm for countless years, only to seize the chance. Jian Wushuang shook his head and smiled bitterly. As for my promotion to the Invincible Supreme, 100,000 years, it may take a long time to achieve half an ancestor level. Feng Qi heard the words and subconsciously bulged and said, "It seems not difficult to be promoted to the half ancestor level. I remember that I was asleep at first, and then became half ancestor level." Jian Wushuang was dumb for a moment, and then nodded, crying and laughing. "Then I will try my best." Feng Qi said seriously, "You are different from others. My instincts are always accurate and I am right." Looking at the inexplicable ancestor of the Phoenix family in front of him inexplicably, his mood was inexplicably relieved a lot. After saying goodbye to Feng Qi, Jian Wushuang stepped slowly on the grassy plain. Pure divine power fills every inch of space, giving people an unspeakable comfort. Time is pressing, and the failure of the battlefield outside the territory is equivalent to the divine universe completely opening the door to the virtual universe. Jian Wushuang had already made a decision, and when the injury of the old lord improved, he once again confronted the army of the imaginary army led by the imaginary god. And in this urgent time, the thought that had only appeared for a moment in my heart emerged again. Perhaps, should I really try to realize that kind of state? Jian Wushuang's eyes looked far away, where Qi Ting came with a warm smile. "Walk around together? All right." The two figures are here, leisurely wandering in the realm of Kangwutai, traveling through thousands of landscapes and watching countless rare and precious beasts. In the clouds, the two are like a fairy in the sky, sitting and watching the strange clouds in this realm. The mountains and the huge rivers stretch one after another, and the 4 seasons of spring, summer, autumn and winter are just transient. In this changing situation, Jian Wushuang's mood has already changed. I am a young person who likes to play alone. All kinds of rare beasts and famous mountains and giant rivers. I am happy to go and wait and see. Later, for various reasons, I have been practicing hard so far. Although my mood has changed a little, but only the fun has not changed. When talking about the past, cheating was a bit proud of satisfaction, so I simply moved all the things I liked before to this Kangwu Taichung. What you see is really real. Yes, there really existed. Jian Wushuang smiled, being able to maintain his original heart as always. Brother Qi's state of mind has surpassed 99 people in the world. Qi Ting smiled loudly, and looked at Jian Wushuang much softer. "Once I was born in my own way, I was born into the heavens." Looking at Wanyu was also a terrifying arrogance, but I didn't know until today that there is heaven beyond the sky. Jian Wushuang did not speak, waiting for the following. "The Kangwutai realm that I created is tens of times larger than the Luodu star territory of my family, but it is like a sea of chestnuts in the eyes of Chaos Spring. Similarly, I also know my own insignificance, and my top realm is just reaching the ceiling of the rules." Speaking of which, Qi Ting paused and said, "Wushuang Palace Master, do you think that the ancestor level is the real peak?" Jian Wushuang only felt that the original cognition existing in his mind was even more confusing. The mysterious and vast land in the sad land, the strange words spoken by the snake in the extreme sea star field, the old deity that walked out from the Blackwater River, has been mysterious to the extreme phagocytosis. All these things are uplifting this his original cognition. If the ancestor level is not the real peak, what else will it be on? He took a deep breath, and Jian Wushuang said slowly. Qi Ting heard the words and smiled loudly, "I don't know." Jian Wushuang was dumb, and then shook his head, crying and laughing, which was really a big circle to return to the original place. "But one thing is for sure, if you want to know more, you need to jump out of the rules that bind you." Qi Ting smiled. "For example, you should break through now. Why set foot on half an ancestor?" Jian Wushuang whispered softly, "It is indeed time." Countless divine powers began to spontaneously escape from his body, like the branches and leaves of the vines, to stretch in the air. Qi Ting smiled slightly when he saw this, and his body withdrew from this world. Between the clouds and the clouds, thousands of red gold gods rose up from the sky. At this moment, All the monks of the divine universe in Kangwatai were shocked to watch the direction that fainted the entire sky into golden. The half-ancestor level testimony, the road flowing, Beoguang endlessly. This guy, is it really so crazy to save the divine universe? The Emperor Taishu, sitting cross-legged, slowly stood up, his eyes unchanged as before. Chapter 46-45. This heaven and earth testimony lasted only 10 years, and even the promotion of the invincible supreme took thousands of years. All monks shivered when they saw the sky dim. Did it fail? How could he fail? 9 Tribulation King, Feng Qi, Blood Wave Supreme, etc. are all nervously looking at that direction. But for nearly 10 years, the lonely bamboo house that has never been opened once, the door was slowly pushed open, and the old man stood by the door, looking calm and calm. Qi Tinki, who has gone to several battles with Jian Wushuang, has 2 brothers. Seeing the sky at this moment, he almost blurted out subconsciously, "Brother, Jian Wushuang, won't he fail?" Qi Ting did not answer, with a faint smile on his face. If this fails, then he is not a person I approve of. The two looked at each other and could get such an evaluation from the elder brother. It seems that this time Jian Wushuang should have succeeded. 10 years ago, the grass that was only a few inches long on the ground has now crossed the knee. The golden rhythm above the sky dome came and went quickly, and it returned to normal in a very short time. A long wind blew through, and a cloud came, and the figure with clouds and smoke around him gradually appeared in everyone's eyes. It's just that the unbridled, fairy-like air is like a cloud-like sea, but it makes Jing Qi upper body, wearing only a pair of black trousers Sword Wushuang, seems more prominent. Feng Qi chuckled and laughed out loud. In her recall, this guy seemed to particularly like bursting clothes every major moment. Afterwards, Feng Qi unfolded the flow of fire clouds behind his back and took the lead in meeting Jian Wushuang. "Here you are." Reaching for a white shirt of Confucianism, Feng Qi smiled and said, "You guys can actually break through in such a short time. I really look down on you." After taking the white shirt and putting it on, Jian Wushuang smiled. Fortunately, that which escaped from Jian Wushuang's body no longer belonged to the invincible supreme power, but a kind of illusory cloud that could not tell the unknown. That is the kind of lingering cloud smoke, which is the proof of Jian Wushuang's achievement in Banzu. The originally calm atmosphere warmed up completely. The naive child rescued by Jian Wushuang in the self-empty universe stood at a distance and looked at this scene at the moment. "Sister Lan Lan, you said that the smelly chess basket has reached a very realm, even more powerful than my master." Lan Lan smiled slightly and reached out to rub the hair bun behind the childish head. "Yes, he is very powerful now, he can protect what he wants to protect." "That's good," the childish face was satisfied. "I hope that the stinky chess basket will always be stronger than my master, so that he can protect himself better." Lan Lan sighed for a moment, and sighed for a long while. "Sister Lan Lan, you said if I wanted to be a child of a stinky chess basket, would he want me?" "Relax, if there is such a day, he will definitely agree." A total of 970,000 monk army, after nearly 10 years of cultivation, Yu Luo broke out of the customs, and once again launched an attack on the army of the imaginary men who invaded the divine universe. The forever figure that always walks in the forefront of the army, every time it appears, is a real transformation. In the invincible state, you can hardly shake the existence of the half-ancestor level. Now that you are promoted to the half-ancestor, who else can stop him? Standing on top of the completely broken Lu, Han Wushuang looked back at the boundless army behind him, holding up the Tai Luo Excalibur in his hand. War. From the extraterritorial battlefield, it has almost extended to the hinterland of the divine universe. During the 10 years since the portal opened, it has already become a dead domain. The rules of the avenue are broken, and the luck is weak. I don't know why it was affected. The star field, which has been reduced to a dead area in a large area, no longer derives divine power. Instead, a weak virtual force is born. Jian Wushuang's eyebrows were tightened, and the luck of the divine universe has shrunk to the extreme in just 10 years. Even under the influence of the virtual universe, he began to be eroded. Xingye Qiwan, while rushing to the extraterritorial battlefield, Jian Wushuang found nearly 10,000 troops with traces of virtual veneration in one of the Hengyang star domains that had been invaded by Su Shi. Jian Wushuang directly waved his hands to kill these 10,000 virtual lords, while leaving a 6-mark virtual venerable to ask about the current situation. Knowing that most of the elite universe is still stationed in the extraterrestrial battlefield, Jian Wushuang led the army to kill all the way. In order to completely destroy the universe of divine power, almost every 10,000 traces of virtual venerable form a unit, quickly eroding the living power. The Star Kingdom God Kingdom that has been completely destroyed is no fewer than tens of thousands. In the broken extraterritorial battlefield, the city of the original base camp has already been occupied by the army of Su Shi. Since the end of the Holocaust battle 10 years ago, the virtual has returned to the virtual universe and has been sleeping to this day. Although the Emperor Devourer also disappeared, his phagocytosis has always dominated the destruction plan. Wherever the phagocytosis has passed, any star field does not leave a live mouth. When the army of nearly 1 million divine forces once again set foot in the outer battlefield, the virtual venerable guarding here retreated. With one sword out, it seems that the sword-like waterfall that divides the world into two halves surging out, and the entire base camp completely occupied by the Su Shi, will be wiped out under this sword. The entire void field outside the territory trembles under this Jiani waterfall. Seeing that there were only less than 26 marks in front of him, Jian Wushuang put away the Tai Luo Excalibur and Xin Xingwei said, "Let your master raise his head and roll over to die." All the 6 marks Su Zun shuddered, and then turned around and fled. But the next moment, the huge crack hidden in the extremely dark, at the intersection of the two universes, slowly opened. 2 giant palms covering the sky with supreme fragility slowly tore apart the cracks. It was a demon ancestor with 4 horns and 6 black chains. The monstrous imaginary force surged, and under that deity ancestor, the imaginary came. That nightmare-like presence appeared. Jian Wushuang took a deep breath and stepped out in one step. The same powerful and unyielding divine power unfolded from the sky, and a pair of unparalleled treasures with sublime patterns of sublime expression emerged. This is a real collision between the half-ancestral divine power and the ancestral imaginary power, but the divine power is not suppressed, but confronted. There is no sorrow and joy in the eyes of the false god, and there are endless traces of the virtual venom behind him, just like the demon from the 9 nether purgatory, covering the sky and the sun. The general trend of the divine power is gone. You arbitrarily lie in front of me, and I can leave you with a whole body. His cold voice resounded, not waiting for Jian Wushuang to speak. The demon ancestor behind the virtual had already raised his arms high and pressed toward the cover of Jian Wushuang. The giant palm surging the strange ciphertext covered the sky, but was repelled by a Qilin shout when it landed. The Kirin treasure with the power of the sun appeared behind the cheating, and the 3 strengths are full. Chapter 46-46. Wearing a Confucian shirt to hunt with the wind, Qi Ting looked indifferently to the false god. At this moment, he was like the king of Qilin, releasing the power of the ancestor to Yang. False god's gaze condensed, the supreme divine power of this middle-aged man surging all over his body. It is an ancestor. When did the divine universe have another ancestor class besides the eternal god? He was not allowed to think at all, and Jian Wushuang's sword, which was extremely sharp in the world, fell to his head. In 10 years he was promoted to Banzu. Only Jian Wushuang knows how grand the enlightenment he has gained. The unrestrained freedom in Kengwu Taichung has finally laid the way for Jian Wushuang to become an ancestor of all things. Jian Wushuang, who has been constrained by pressure and has grown up to the present, all he wants is guardianship. It was also the premature perception that had penetrated his own way, and everything was so natural that he went straight to the ancestor. Wushuang Kendo, Zingahujianjian. The second form, river. The infinite swordsmanship condenses into a long river of sword waterfalls, the most ordinary and the most powerful form, which lays the framework for the entire Wushuang Kendo. The vast and powerful sword spectrum flows up the river, facing the deity ancestor. Looking at the opponent who had been like an ant in the past, the sword was released, and it was faint that he felt a little throbbing at the moment. The imaginary waved his sleeves, and the celestial demon ancestor behind him roared, waving two giant arms full of chains to deal with it. The two are opposite. The sword waterfall is roaring and roaring, directly crushing and destroying the two arms of the demon ancestor, and then the castration is unabated, just like 1,000 swords hanging in the sky. At this moment, both the divine universe and the imaginary universe were shocked. With the power of half-ancestor, break the ancestral magic phase. The growth of Jian Wushuang has completely surpassed everyone's imagination. Even the blood wave supreme closest to Jian Wushuang is incredible. The heavenly demon ancestor mourned, and a huge amount of virtual force spewed out of his mouth, and countless vertical and horizontal sword intentions completely penetrated his body surface, which was completely dimmed. False God took a step back, and he looked at the figure in disbelief. It was only a decade away. The ants that could be eliminated with a wave of hand turned into what they are today. Without giving the Shushan any breathing opportunity, Jian Wushuang held his in the right hand together to outline a vast sword. With an invisible sword, a tangible trend emerges. He has no sword in his hand, but a sword in his heart. The vast swords are intertwined with each other like a dense net, and they walk towards the virtual god. Qi Ting followed. He smiled slightly, and behind him came the Kirin treasure phase, which turned into the power of the countless Dao Yang to strangle the army of Su Shi. The power belonging to the ancestor level has long been beyond the reach of the venerable master. As soon as the power of the unicorn to the sun came out, the venerable master who stepped into the divine universe was 300,000. The destructive power of the ancestors is too terrible, everything is born and died, and even the half-ancestors can only drink on the spot. The millions of troops that came out of the virtual universe were wiped out in more than half in just a moment. And just as Qi Ting was about to make another shot, since the cracks of that day, a horrible existence came out again. The emperor's crown above his head, dressed in black Jinhua costume, is like a dark master. Come here. His appearance made Qi Ting vigilant. However, the emperor's gaze did not stay beside him from beginning to end, but looked at Lao Zun. You did not die. With unwilling suppression of anger, resounded through the entire battlefield outside the territory. Lao Zun looked calm and looked at Emperor Yan with a touch of disdain. Just like you want to kill me? A short sentence directly ignited the emperor, the nothingness quaked, and 8 real shadows emerged from behind him. I can hit you once, and I can hit you a second time, waiting for the devouring of this king. The 8 real shadows are different in color, but their faces are exactly the same as the old ones. Just like the sudden darkness, each of them has a real shadow of ancestor-level strength and gallops. Qi Ting couldn't help it, and directly turned the thick Jiang divine power into a barrier of enchantment in front of the monk army. Boom! The combined effort of the 8 Daos Hinyings easily tore the Qiang divine power of cheating and went straight to the old deity. That terrifying power, even cheating began to palpitate. Is that hard to understand terrorist power really an ancestral power? On the other side, Jian Wushuang, who approached the false god with just one palm, seemed much easier. He seemed to be a fairy in the sky of Yanyi, and every blow that seemed to be fluttering was enough to cause serious damage to the virtual god. The false god, who could have shot him to death with a single palm, could only resist under the endless offensive at the moment. Probing with one finger, the invisible sword intention suddenly pierced the left shoulder of the virtual god. The blood of the ancestors fell, and his face was rueful. The most erroneous decision I made was to let go of your life. As soon as the words came out, Jian Wushuang's calm state of mind trembles. What are you talking about? False god's eyes were cold. I didn't expect that in just 10 years, you would grow to the point where you are today. If I knew that, I would definitely wipe you out. Suddenly, the final scenes of that catastrophe battle 10 years ago all came to mind. Jian Wushuang finally understood why he and Lao Zun were able to survive. It turned out that the virtual god's devastating blow pushed him away from him at the moment of the explosion. Taking a deep breath, Jian Wushuang said in a deep voice, "Why do you do that?" False god smiled coldly, "There will be a reasonable concern behind all unreasonable things, but I am still wrong. To make up for the mistakes I made, I will completely destroy you today." With the sound of a deep voice, the body of the virtual wrapped in black mist instantly lit up endless mysterious runes. Jian Wushuang only felt that a great terror between life and death surged into his heart. He almost turned sideways by instinct and escaped several chains looted from the body of the virtual god. And the clothes on the left shoulder slightly touching the chain began to break quickly. Missed by one blow, the chain returned to the body, and the false gods with mysterious runes flashed in his eyes, with the fiery flame in his eyes, and he looked at Jian Wushuang from a distance. Virtual God, who almost carried the entire virtual universe with luck, was terrified at the moment. Even Jian Wushuang felt a life-and-death crisis when facing him. The destruction of the divine power universe is a foregone conclusion. Your appearance is only to add the last sadness to the divine power universe. I will remember you, but you must die in my hands. False god's eyes were scorching, and after finishing this last sentence, he no longer intended to speak. Since his innumerable mysterious runes gradually sublimated into the void, condensed into a strange array. They are tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.